Every monster girl I targeted started simping for me, and yes, their Gaiat literally made me stronger. I learned that inside Blackridge Dungeon, where I was an F-rank hero standing between an injured Alyssa Benton and a demon princess named Odessa. My Heartlock system had one rule: lock one target, turn her strongest feelings toward me, and cash the reaction into power. Princess Odessa swung for my neck, so I locked her. She kissed me instead, and Heartlock paid me in attack power. My name was Liam Corbett. Alyssa was my injured childhood friend, and I was the only thing between her and Odessa. Alyssa could barely stand behind me. Her left leg was bleeding through a torn boot, and Odessa's next clean strike would finish her. I could run and leave Alyssa under that blade. I stayed. The system flashed one result across my vision. Attack increased. 3 demon soldiers rushed me before Odessa could decide why she had kissed an F-rank stranger. I swung my cheap guild sword once. All 3 soldiers left the ground. 1 hit. 3 bodies. A crater across the stone. Alyssa stared at my F-rank badge, then at the soldiers. Odessa touched her mouth. Her own execution had turned into a first date from a nightmare. I was prepared to call the whole thing a heroic sacrifice. Alyssa's expression said she had other vocabulary. One soldier lowered his axe. "Princess Odessa, is this human your secret boyfriend?" Odessa's tail split the floor beside him. "Repeat that and lose your tongue." The soldier shut his mouth. His friend did not learn from the example. The second soldier pointed at Odessa. "Then why did you kiss him?" Odessa turned her blade toward him. "That bought me a brief opening and created a rumor strong enough to kill me later." Look, I knew how the scene looked. A gorgeous demon princess had kissed me, powered me up, and started threatening witnesses. On paper, that sounded excellent. The problem was everything else trying to murder us. Heartlock could hold one target at a time. A strong reaction produced a reward. It did not upgrade my sword, heal Alyssa, or make my F-rank bones less breakable. I learned the equipment clause immediately. The expedition captain had sent Alyssa and me down the lower route as bait, then sealed the gate behind us. Odessa was doing exactly what he expected the route to do. Odessa pointed at me. "Kill the human, slowly." The remaining soldiers charged together. I met the first axe head-on. My boosted strike cut through the weapon and buried my blade in the demon's shoulder guard. The impact launched him across the chamber. The soldier stopped laughing. Then my sword cracked from hilt to tip. The second demon's hammer hit my chest. My starter armor split down the middle, and I skidded across the stone. Heartlock had upgraded my stats. My sword and armor were still bargain bin trash. Alyssa dragged herself toward me. "Liam, move!" A spear came down at my neck. Odessa's tail snapped around the shaft and stopped it inches from my skin. The soldier looked back at her. "Princess?" Odessa planted one boot on my chest. "He is mine to finish. Touch him again and I will finish you first." The spear lowered. Alyssa stopped looking afraid. She pushed herself upright against the wall. Odessa bent over me and brushed the hair from my ear. Odessa lowered her face. "Still pretending you don't want me?" I looked at the boot pinning my ribs. "Your sales technique needs work." Odessa smiled and bit my ear. The contact was light. The system reaction was ridiculous. Defense increased. Agility increased. Attack increased. Her tail tightened around my waist. Every possessive twitch paid again. The soldiers traded nervous looks. One whispered, "Is that torture?" Another watched Odessa's face. "Then why is she blushing?" Odessa heard him. Her tail flicked once. The wall behind that soldier gained a new body-shaped dent. The boyfriend rumor spread anyway. Alyssa took one painful step toward us. "Get off him!" Odessa glanced over her shoulder. "The injured human is still speaking." "She does that," I told Odessa, "usually right before saving me." Alyssa raised her trembling sword. "Usually right after he deserves it." Odessa's eyes narrowed at her. Jealousy hit the Heartlock meter, and my agility jumped again. Beautiful. My rescue plan had become annoying two dangerous women in different directions. I grabbed the broken half of my sword and drove it toward Odessa's side. She caught my wrist without looking. Her smile disappeared. Odessa's voice went cold. "Sneaky little human." Odessa lifted me by the arm and threw me into the wall. Stone broke behind my shoulders. The last plates of my armor snapped loose and hit the floor. I rolled before her tail struck again, then cut at the nearest soldier's knee. The broken blade drew sparks and stopped short. My attack had climbed. My broken blade was barely longer than my hand. Odessa caught me from behind and pinned both arms. Odessa murmured near my ear, "You keep struggling." I twisted against her grip. "You keep rewarding it." She paused. Heartlock flashed another increase. Odessa stared at the empty air in front of me, unable to see the screen. "What are you smiling at?" I grinned. "Professional development!" She slammed me face first into the stone. Alyssa lunged. A soldier blocked her and knocked the sword from her weakened hand. I stopped joking. Odessa was my only active target. Her reactions were still paying. I needed enough power to break the circle before Alyssa took another hit, so I twisted under Odessa and mocked the one thing she could not ignore. I looked up at her. Your soldiers think you like me. Her tail cracked beside my head. They think whatever I allow. I held her stare. Then kill me. Odessa held me there. The reward counter blurred. The soldiers backed away. One glanced toward the entrance, then a heavier sword struck the floor behind Odessa. The chamber went silent. Odessa froze against me. I did not know his name yet. I knew Odessa had a lover, and he had arrived. Odessa had chosen me. Her lover was the consequence. The stone beneath Odessa's knee cracked as my strength rose again. Alyssa still stood injured across the chamber, so the win had a deadline. My refusal to leave Alyssa had history. Years earlier, a schoolyard game had decided Alyssa was too ugly to play the mother. One boy pointed at her and laughed. Nobody wants her. I slapped him. I was 8, small, and already terrible at diplomacy. The hit still landed. His friends suddenly became fascinated by the clouds. I kicked aside the toy chair, took Alyssa's hand, and pulled her into the chalk house. You can be the mom, I told her. I'll be the dad. I'll take responsibility. Alyssa squeezed my fingers. You really want me? I picked you, didn't I? Then she leaned closer. Mom's and dad's kiss. I dropped the toy cup, stepped through the chalk wall, and abandoned my new family before lunch. In my defense, I was 8. I panicked before lunch. Alyssa remembered both parts, the promise and the sprint. 6 months before Blackridge, a city raid gave me a death sentence. A hero and several monsters fought over a sealed metal box downtown. One monster split it open, and the blast threw me through a storefront. Crimson liquid burst across the street as rain. The exposed hero collapsed. The monsters followed. Anything the red rain touched started dissolving. Falling concrete buried me before the rain reached the sidewalk. That saved my skin and trapped me inside the vapor. Medics found no burns and cleared me. They missed what I had breathed. Days later, I coughed purple blood. A doctor studied my scan, took off his glasses, and gave me 1 year. Purple blood came first, cuts followed, then pieces of me would stop recovering. I asked about treatment. He offered painkillers. That night, Heartlock appeared over my hospital bed. Only demon god blood inside Blackridge Dungeon can remove the poison. Accept full binding? I accepted before the prompt finished blinking. Dying made me extremely easy to onboard. Before the expedition, Captain Vaughn found a petty excuse to send me exactly where the cure was. At the guild supply table, he accused me of knowing what color underwear his wife wore. I blamed improved perception. Then I proved the point by naming the colors worn by several people nearby. One soldier checked himself. Another closed his coat. A woman threw a glove at my head. Vaughn pointed at me. Pervert. Observant pervert, I corrected. Alyssa covered her face. Liam, stop helping yourself. The supply crew laughed. Vaughn did not. Before sunset, he assigned Alyssa and me to the lower decoy route. Alyssa checked the marker. This passage drops below the approved map. Vaughn shoved the gate open. Then earn your badges and make a new one. We entered. The stone gate slammed behind us. The lock clicked from Vaughn's side, and the main squad walked away. Decoy had become burial with extra walking. The lower stairs collapsed under a charging monster. Alyssa shoved me across the gap, took the falling stone against her leg, and still killed the thing before it reached me. Her knee folded when she tried to stand, so I carried her through the next tunnel. Put me down, Alyssa told me. Your leg is decorative right now. I can still swing a sword. I shifted her higher. Great, swing it from up there. The tunnel opened into Odessa's chamber. She stood over fallen fighters in armor that was winning my attention until the sword came up. Alyssa grabbed my sleeve. Run, Liam. I'm D rank and I can't stand. You're F rank. She'll kill both of us. I put Alyssa down and stepped in front of her. You always choose the stupid brave option, she whispered. I glanced back. You always notice. Hard not to. You're usually blocking my view. Then Odessa swung. Heartlock turned the strike into a kiss, and the whole chamber lost its mind. Back in the chamber, the heavy sword's ring was still fading. Odessa still had my arms pinned while the reward counter climbed. Alyssa was reaching for her fallen sword. The remaining soldiers were watching their princess choose me over her own command. One soldier cleared his throat. Princess Odessa, should we kill the injured woman? Odessa's eyes stayed on me. Nobody moves until I decide what this human is. That order kept Alyssa alive and made every soldier stare harder. I tested the new strength against Odessa's grip. My shoulders lifted her an inch. The stone beneath my knees cracked. Her eyes widened. Then her tail coiled around both my legs and slammed them flat. Odessa tightened her tail. Do that again? I grinned through the pressure. You sound curious? Odessa slammed my legs flat. I sound murderous. Heartlock paid me for the lie her face told. Alyssa reached her sword and dragged it closer with 2 fingers. Her eyes met mine. She was hurt, outnumbered, and still preparing to attack a demon princess for me. She had already dragged herself across the chamber twice. Her leg kept failing. She kept reaching. I shifted my wrist toward the broken blade. Odessa noticed and pressed harder. Every demon soldier dropped to one knee. Odessa's body went still against mine. Heartlock flashed one new warning. Jealous witness detected. The man at the entrance was Odessa's lover. Judging by the sword, the horns, and the silence, he could kill all three of us. My broken blade would still be falling. Inside the same Blackridge chamber, the heavy sword belonged to Demon Lord Conrad. He was Odessa's lover and the strongest demon in the room. He had arrived while she held me against a wall with my armor scattered around her feet. Conrad looked at her. Then he looked at me. His sword slipped from his hand. Heartlock chimed before the metal stopped ringing. Jealous witness multiplier. Total gains doubled. My attack, defense, and agility surged at once. The floor cracked under my heel before I even moved. One demon soldier stopped smiling. Another tightened both hands around his spear. They had seen enough. Look, I had survived worse positions physically. Socially, this was a new personal record. Conrad raised one hand. A black blast crossed the room. The new agility let me turn before it landed. I caught the edge on my broken sword, and the steel vanished from my hand. The rest of the blast hit my chest and drove me through the wall. My doubled defense kept my body together. The wall broke behind me. Conrad stared through the dust. The surprise on his face said he had expected paste. I stood up instead. He stopped raging blindly and started watching how I moved. Honestly, that was worse. Odessa released me and spun toward Conrad. "What are you doing?" Conrad's voice shook the chamber. "Explain why a human is in your arms." Odessa pointed one claw at him. "Explain why you arrived late." The demon soldiers kept their heads down. Smart men. Nobody wanted eye contact during the worst relationship argument in Blackridge. Conrad stepped forward. "I killed every human force between here and the upper gate." Odessa cut him off. "And still took too long." Conrad's anger stalled. Then the demon lord who had slaughtered his way across the dungeon lowered his head. "I apologize." One of his officers looked up by accident. Conrad saw him and pointed toward the exit. The officer fled before the punishment arrived. Man! Conrad was cooked before the real fight even started. His troops had dropped to their knees when he entered. Now they were listening to him apologize beside the man his lover had kissed. Odessa folded her arms. "You should!" Conrad tried to recover. "Now release him." Odessa glanced at me. "No!" That single word hit him harder than my sword ever could. I crawled to Alyssa while the two demons argued about punctuality during a massacre. Alyssa tried to stand on her injured leg and almost fell. I caught her and lifted her into my arms. Alyssa whispered near my ear, "You keep carrying me." I adjusted her weight. "You can complain when your leg works." Alyssa rested one arm around my neck. I wasn't complaining. That line nearly made me miss the turn. Her timing was criminal. I ran for the side corridor. The doubled agility carried me farther than I expected. I hit the first turn with Alyssa in my arms and nearly ran straight into the wall. Excellent power, questionable onboarding. Alyssa tightened her grip around my neck. Left. I took the left passage as Conrad's blade cut through the corner behind us. Odessa noticed first. Her tail slapped the floor. "The human is escaping." Conrad turned toward me. The quarrel had given us a brief lead. Odessa's accusation erased most of it. Odessa jabbed a finger at him. "He poisoned our relationship." I had known Odessa for several minutes. Apparently I had already destroyed a royal romance. So much for heroic sacrifice. I was now the suspected homewrecker. Conrad's face changed. The apology vanished. Murder came back online. He crossed the chamber in one step. I heard him behind me and shifted Alyssa to my left arm. Conrad drove straight at my back. I planted my foot and swung the broken blade at his wrist. The cut reached his armor and stopped. His fist did not. The remaining metal shattered and drove me backward with Alyssa still in my arms. I landed on one knee near the corridor mouth. My forearm went numb. Alyssa's injured boot struck the floor, and she bit down a cry. Conrad lifted his blade over both of us. Alyssa pushed against my chest. "Put me down and move." I tightened my hold. "No." Alyssa grabbed my collar. "Liam." I met her eyes. "You don't get left behind because powerful people find it convenient." That was the whole argument. I kept Alyssa against me and looked at the Heartlock screen. "Do something useful," I muttered. The system did nothing. Conrad's blade came down. Odessa hit him across the face with her tail. The impact threw the demon lord through a stone pillar. Conrad rose slowly, one hand against his cheek. Odessa placed herself between us. "I told you not to touch him." Heartlock flashed bright enough to sting my eyes. Critical emotional hit. Level increased. System HR had apparently classified heartbreak as combat damage. Its ethics department was a dark room with a loose raccoon. Conrad stared at Odessa. "You struck me for him." Odessa's chin lifted. "You were being irritating." Conrad struck his chest. "I am your demon lord." Odessa looked at the handprint on his cheek. "Then act less irritating." A soldier near the doorway turned his face away. His shoulders still shook. Laughing at Conrad was suicidal. Failing to laugh was apparently impossible. The soldiers around us stopped kneeling and started backing toward the exits. Conrad still had the crown, the sword, and the power. Nobody stepped forward with him. He charged me again. Odessa chased me first. Her tail wrapped around my waist, yanked me out of Conrad's path, and slammed me flat. Then she climbed over me and caught both my wrists. Odessa pinned my wrists. "Stop running!" I jerked against her grip. "Your boyfriend is trying to kill me." Odessa did not look back. "He will wait." Conrad actually stopped. "I need you to understand how bad that looked." The demon lord had just been put on hold while his girlfriend pinned the F-rank intruder. Odessa leaned closer. "I want you. Your body stays with me." I stared up at her. "I have plans." Odessa smiled. "Cancel them." I pulled against her grip. "My schedule includes surviving today." Her smile widened. "Then cooperate." Alyssa dragged herself toward us and grabbed Odessa's tail. "Get away from him." Odessa flicked the tail once. It wrapped Alyssa's arms and held her against the floor. I twisted under Odessa. "Leave her out of this." Odessa looked at Alyssa, then back at me. "You care about her?" Her voice sharpened on the last word. Heartlock paid another agility increase. Conrad sank to one knee. His hand closed around the sword until the metal groaned. Odessa pointed at him without looking away from me. "Do not interfere!" Conrad's shoulders started shaking. I caught Alyssa's eye beyond Odessa's tail. Alyssa had one arm free. She used it to reach for a fallen dagger. I shook my head once. Conrad's sword hand was shaking. Odessa was feeding Heartlock, and any new attack could turn both of them on Alyssa. Alyssa's jaw tightened. She let the dagger remain. That quiet trust bought me room to keep playing the ugliest game in the chamber. The soldiers nearest the door ran. Conrad stood and rushed Odessa with his blade raised. Odessa turned too late. The edge stopped a breath from her neck. Conrad's arm trembled. He could attack her. He could not finish the strike. Odessa watched him hesitate. Then she turned her back on him and reached for me again. Conrad's sword slipped lower. Red light spread beneath his skin and across the cracks in his armor. A pressure wave rolled through the chamber. The walls began shedding dust. Every torch bent toward him. One fleeing soldier screamed, "The demon lord is self-destructing!" The remaining troops stampeded into the tunnels. Two dropped their weapons. A third shoved his own commander out of the doorway. The exit jammed with bodies. Odessa released me. "Stop this." Conrad's glow burned brighter instead. Conrad laughed once. It sounded broken. Conrad raised his glowing face. "If I cannot have you, Odessa, this level dies with us." Odessa's expression finally changed. Her tail released Alyssa. The system flashed my level across the screen. Level 10 reached. New skill, flash step slash. The rule arrived with the danger. Flash step slash needed a weapon. I had half a blade and several seconds before Conrad turned the chamber into a crater. The broken steel only had to survive one clean motion. So did my arm. Good enough. I shoved Odessa aside, gripped the shattered steel, and ran straight at him. Conrad saw an F-rank with a broken sword. His mouth curled. Conrad sneered. "Filth!" I activated flash step slash. The chamber vanished into one white line. I passed Conrad before his smile finished forming. His head left his shoulders. The red light went out. For one breath, the chamber became quiet. Odessa stared at Conrad's body. Alyssa lowered the arm she had raised to shield her face. I let the broken sword fall. Then Conrad's body moved. The corpse lunged, wrapped both arms around Odessa, and drove her against the altar wall. The red light returned twice as bright. Conrad was dead. The self-destruct was still active. Conrad's severed body tightened around Odessa as if he could drag her into death by force. Conrad's severed head rasped from the floor. "Together! We die together!" Odessa clawed at his arms. Her magic flickered and failed. Alyssa pointed toward a broken shaft at the edge of the chamber. "Liam, the lower level!" The ceiling split above us. I had one root and two people who could not take it alone. I planted a foot against the wall and tore Conrad's dead grip loose. The broken blade cut through his elbow. Odessa fell into me. I caught her with one arm, lifted Alyssa with the other, and ran for the shaft. Winning meant nothing if Alyssa stayed under that ceiling. The chamber exploded behind us. Heat hit my back as we dropped through the dark. Stone, fire, and pieces of Conrad's throne followed us down. Odessa's claws locked around my shoulder. Alyssa's face pressed against my neck. The lower floor rushed toward us. I twisted so my body took the first impact. My shoulder struck stone, then my hip, then the remains of my dignity. We rolled across wet rock and stopped beneath a collapsed arch. A slab crashed where we had landed a moment earlier. The blast sealed the shaft above us. Conrad's soldiers, throne, and relationship problems stayed upstairs. For several seconds, none of us moved. Alyssa coughed against my shoulder. "Still alive." "Show off," I told her, because my hands were shaking and the alternative was admitting it. A tiny voice squeaked from inside my torn shirt. "Remove your hand!" I looked down. A hand-sized red salamander with Odessa's furious eyes was wedged inside my pocket. Her magic had flickered out during Conrad's collapse. Her body had shrunk with it. I lifted the pocket open. Princess Odessa? Odessa bared tiny teeth. Do not use that tone. I widened the pocket. You fit beside a bandage. I have several tones. Odessa bit the edge of my shirt. I am conserving power. I tapped the pocket. You're hiding in my pocket. Odessa bit harder. Conserving it privately. The pocket princess had arrived. My dignity was gone. Heartlock chimed again. Demon Lord Conrad defeated. Reward. Blackridge map. A dark map unfolded across my vision. Safe passages glowed in pale lines. Traps, resources, and boss routes appeared only when I focused on them. One route climbed toward the expedition squad. Another descended toward the boss chamber and the blood that could save me. Several red marks moved between both paths. Heartlock gave me no tutorial. Good. The map gave me the first useful directions I had seen all day. Alyssa watched my eyes track the invisible lines. You can see something again. A route, I told her. It leads toward the demon god blood. My body failed before I could celebrate. Purple liquid filled my mouth. I coughed it across the stone and dropped to both knees. Thin cuts opened along my arms. Heat burned through my left hand. Alyssa caught me before my face hit the floor. My smallest finger turned black at the tip, broke apart, and vanished in the purple mist. The chamber, the map, and Odessa's voice all blurred. Alyssa pressed my hand against her shirt and held me through the shaking. Odessa crawled from my pocket and touched the edge of the spreading purple stain. Her tiny claws pulled back at once. Even the demon princess stopped making demands. Alyssa's voice shook. Liam, what is this? I could not joke around her fear. I answered, the blood rain from 6 months ago poisoned me. Doctors gave me a year. Heartlock says the demon god blood inside Blackridge can cure it. Alyssa looked at the space where my finger had been. How much time is left? I tried to dodge it. Less than I want. Alyssa tightened her grip. Give me the real answer. I met her eyes. The doctors gave me a year. 6 months are already gone. Alyssa's face went still. She looked from my missing finger to every scar I had kept covered. Alyssa tightened her grip around my hand. Then we find it. I leaned against the wall and let her keep hold of my hand. I exhaled. First I need a short rest, new clothes, and a weapon longer than a dinner knife. Odessa poked her head from my pocket. I require food. Alyssa stared at the tiny demon princess. Odessa stared back. Alyssa pointed at Odessa. She tried to kill us. She also saved me twice, I told her. Odessa lifted her chin. 3 times, count properly. Alyssa's eyes narrowed. You kissed him once and attacked him more times than I counted. Odessa sniffed. The kiss was effective. I stood between them with 9 fingers, no armor, and a map pointing deeper underground. This was apparently my team now. The Blackridge map marked the nearest route upward. We followed it through a narrow tunnel until a sealed door appeared ahead. A white beam flashed through the cracks. A man screamed once on the other side. Then the door began to open. The Blackridge map led Alyssa and me to a sealed door on the dungeon's upper route. Before it opened, another laser fired on the other side and a second man stopped screaming. Aaron Keats later told me what happened during the minutes before we arrived. Aaron was the squad's B-rank vice captain, and he still treated human lives like they belonged to humans. Captain Von Heller had led the main squad into a corridor covered by invisible laser lines. He was the captain who had sealed Alyssa and me below. Their armored tank took 1 step onto the black tiles. A white beam crossed his chest and dropped him before the shield hit the floor. The armor stayed whole. Inside it, the man did not move again. Nobody moved. The corridor needed no second demonstration. Aaron had ordered everyone back. He planted himself between the corridor and the low-rank soldiers before Vaughn could point at anyone. Vaughn looked at the body and chose the weakest soldier instead. The chosen man had joined the expedition carrying spare ropes and water. Vaughn scanned the rank badges and pointed at the weakest one. Walk the corridor, Vaughn ordered. Find the safe route. The bait soldier shook his head. Captain, I can't see the traps, Vaughn snapped. Then discover them. Aaron drew a silver scouting arrow from his pack. The arrow could test the corridor without risking a person. Use this first, Aaron told Vaughn. We read the path and keep the squad alive. Several soldiers nodded. Vaughn looked from their faces to Aaron, and his jaw tightened. He snatched the arrow and broke it over his knee. The silver tip bounced beside the dead tank. Aaron watched it stop, then looked at Vaughn with a disgust he no longer bothered hiding. Vaughn pointed the broken shaft at him. Question me again and you can walk beside him. Vaughn's first 2 ideas were simple. Waste the safe tool, then threaten the competent man. Honestly, I don't know what he thought leadership was supposed to look like. The bait soldier stepped onto the floor. 1 tile stayed dark. He looked back, breathing hard. Vaughn waved him forward with 2 fingers. The next tile flashed. A beam struck through his head and dropped him beside the tank. One of the man's friends moved toward the body. Aaron caught his shoulder and held him back before the corridor claimed a 3rd victim. Vaughn pointed at another low-rank soldier. Next, that was when our door opened. Alyssa and I stepped through together. Vaughn's hand remained raised. His mouth opened, then closed. I was missing a finger, and my armor was gone. A tiny demon princess was hiding in my pocket, but alive still counted. Vaughn looked through the open door, then at my missing armor and hand. Both decoys had returned, only one of us looked like the lower route had tried to eat him. A soldier near the back whispered, "That's the F rank." Another looked at the bodies. He came from the lower route. A third man stepped away from Vaughn and made room for Alyssa. The movement was small. Vaughn saw it anyway. Vaughn recovered his voice. "Liam Corbett, cross the floor." Alyssa moved in front of me despite her injured leg. "He just came through the lower levels. Find another way." Vaughn drew his sword and rested the edge against my neck. Vaughn pressed the blade closer. "The decoy speaks when I permit it." Aaron stepped forward. "Captain, we already lost 2 people." Vaughn turned the blade toward him. "Would you like to make it 3? Nobody answered the threat. I looked at the dead-bait soldier. Vaughn had sent Alyssa and me to die. Now he wanted the same trick again because it had worked on someone else. The Blackridge map unfolded across my vision. A pale root appeared over the laser floor. I lifted Vaughn's blade away from my neck with 2 fingers. "Fine," I told him. "Try to keep up." Vaughn's eyes narrowed. "You will go first." I tapped his blade aside. "That is what keep up means, Captain." It was petty. My finger had melted off not long earlier, and I had earned a little attitude. I stepped onto the first safe tile. No beam. The next mark sat left. A white line snapped on behind my heel and burned the wall. I stepped over the dead tank, followed the pale route, and reached the middle without looking back. Vaughn had not moved. The captain who had ordered 2 men forward was standing safely behind Aaron. "So, I hopped once." Half the squad flinched. I hopped again. Aaron covered a laugh. Alyssa did not bother. Vaughn's face tightened. "Stop playing! I'm demonstrating confidence!" "You're demonstrating stupidity." I stepped backward onto the next safe tile without looking. No beam. The insult died in his mouth. After that, Aaron moved the vulnerable fighters along the marks I called. He carried 1 wounded man across the widest gap and came back for another. Alyssa stayed behind me despite her leg. Whenever she slipped, I held out my hand. She took it without comment. Vaughn followed close enough to put a sword through my back. Before that corridor, I had been disposable. After it, every person there watched my boots before moving theirs. The last soldier reached the far side. One guard slapped my shoulder. "You saved all of us!" Vaughn stared at the man's hand until it dropped. A few soldiers still looked at me instead of Vaughn for the next order. Even his closest guard waited for my hand before moving. Vaughn noticed. His sword touched the skin beneath my ear. Vaughn's voice dropped. "How did an F rank survive the lower route?" I smiled. "Excellent footwork." Vaughn pressed the blade harder. "How did you know every safe tile?" I smiled wider. "Better footwork." The blade pressed harder. Alyssa raised her weapon. Aaron shifted between Vaughn and the squad. Vaughn saw both movements and pulled the sword back. "You will lead from here," Vaughn ordered. "Every trap, every monster, you walk first." That was my promotion, disposable bait to unpaid trailblazer. Still, the map gave me the advantage. Vaughn had the badge. I had the route everybody needed. We moved deeper toward the boss room. The map warned me about a pressure plate beneath loose gravel. I stepped over it and made the squad copy me. At the next bend, a pack of monsters crossed the tunnel ahead. I held everyone in a side passage until the pack passed. Every remaining fighter reached the next corridor alive. Vaughn stopped watching the route. He watched me instead. Soon after, Odessa started biting the inside of my pocket. Odessa whispered from my pocket, "Food." I kept walking. "I'm working." Odessa bit the cloth. "Work faster." Alyssa heard the tiny voice. "Your passenger is demanding service." I glanced back. "Jealous?" Alyssa's mouth curved. "Of a lizard living beside your bandages?" "Deeply." Odessa's head popped out. "I am a princess." Alyssa smiled at her. "A pocket-sized princess." Odessa hissed at her. The pocket princess label stuck immediately. The map highlighted a patch of pale green mushrooms beside the wall. "Monster safe. Human poison." I crouched and wrapped 2 in cloth. Vaughn snatched one from my hand. Vaughn held it up. "What did you find?" "Monster food," I told him. Vaughn looked at the mushroom, then at me. "You expect me to believe an F rank found edible supplies before my scouts?" I reached for it. "I expect you to stop stealing lunch from a lizard. That was too much dignity for him. You know where this is going." Vaughn bit the mushroom in half. Odessa watched from my pocket with open offense. Odessa whispered from my pocket, "He ate mine." I covered her head with my palm. "Life is cruel." Odessa shoved against my hand. "Make it crueler." I liked her attitude. Concerning development, at first Vaughn looked pleased with himself. He chewed slowly and made sure I saw it. Then his stomach growled loud enough to interrupt the marching boots. Aaron glanced back. "Captain?" Vaughn straightened. "Keep moving." The pocket princess sniffed the air and looked personally insulted. "He poisoned my food with himself." I covered the pocket before she climbed out to start a second boss fight. A second sound escaped him a few steps later. The soldiers nearest him sped up. A sour smell rolled through the corridor. The rear line broke formation. Several soldiers rushed forward and nearly stepped on the pressure plate I had marked. I blocked them with one arm and pointed at my footprints. Stay on the route unless you want the traps to kill you before the smell does. One guard covered his mouth. Dungeon poison. Another pointed at the floor. The gas is coming through the cracks. Vaughn nodded as if he had discovered the threat himself. Shameless. Even his stomach problems needed stolen credit. Captain Credit. The label fit. He could steal praise from a gas leak. Vaughn looked at the squad and chose the lie. Vaughn barked, "Run! The floor is toxic!" I followed the map and increased our pace. That forced Vaughn to run with the mushroom fighting for public recognition inside him. Every few yards the squad heard another ugly sound from the rear. Nobody looked back. Respect had limits. Alyssa limped beside me, shoulders shaking. I warned Alyssa. "Don't laugh," Alyssa whispered. "I'm injured. This is medicine." Aaron caught up on my other side. "Is the floor actually toxic? I kept my face straight. Only to thieves." Aaron looked over his shoulder at Vaughn. His mouth twitched and he moved closer to me. Near the next junction, Vaughn grabbed my shoulder and spun me around. His face had gone pale, but his voice stayed loud enough for the squad. Vaughn hissed, "What did you feed me?" I pointed at his hand. "You took it from me." Vaughn leaned closer. "You knew?" I pointed at his stomach. "I said monster food. You heard premium captain rations." A soldier behind Vaughn coughed to hide a laugh. Vaughn turned. The soldier looked fascinated by the ceiling. Public humiliation had entered the chat, and the captain could not arrest a smell. Vaughn leaned close. "Fix it!" I turned away. "Walk it off." His hand moved toward his sword. Alyssa stepped beside me. Aaron stepped beside her. The rest of the squad watched. Vaughn released the hilt. Using the map, I led us around several monster nests and trap corridors. I never explained how. I turned before the danger appeared, and the squad followed. Aaron began repeating my hand signals before Vaughn could issue orders. Alyssa matched every turn without asking. Even the soldiers who had laughed at my rank watched me for the next move. Each correct choice made Vaughn quieter. Near the boss room, his eyes stopped watching the floor. They started watching me. The map showed a red monster marker moving inside the wall beside us. It kept pace without attacking. The ceiling above the next passage held a stone spike the size of a wagon. The map marked it as stable. Vaughn ordered the squad to spread out, then placed himself directly behind me. Alyssa was 2 steps ahead. Aaron had moved back to help the wounded. The timing was too neat. Captain Credit walked with his sword angled upward. He lifted it and cut through the spike's stone support. The map changed from stable to falling. I shoved Alyssa forward. The spike dropped. A black scorpion tail burst through the wall and smashed the stone aside before it reached me. The broken spike hit Vaughn instead, clipping his shoulder and throwing him across the corridor. His sword spun away and stuck in the wall beside one of his own men. Too bad for him. His murder attempt had terrible aim and even worse customer service. The tail struck again. It came from a crack behind the stone, armored in black plates and thick as my waist. The point aimed straight for Vaughn's chest. Vaughn blocked with his sword. The impact cracked the floor from wall to wall. Aaron grabbed Alyssa and pulled her toward the squad. Alyssa fought him with her good leg. "Liam is still there," Aaron shouted over the cracking stone. "The floor is breaking. Move now or we lose both of you." I jumped for them. Alyssa reached across the widening crack. Our hands missed by inches. The corridor collapsed between us. Stone swallowed the opening. Dust filled my mouth. Alyssa shouted my name from the other side, but the next impact buried her voice. I rolled onto my back in a narrow chamber beyond the rubble. The scorpion tail withdrew into the dark. A woman's voice spoke above me. "Why is a human crawling through my territory?" I thought the falling spike was Vaughn's worst idea. Then the tail saved me, split me from Alyssa, and left me beneath the woman guarding the real boss. The narrow chamber beyond the rubble left me alone with the woman who owned the scorpion tail. Alyssa, Aaron, and Vaughn's squad were trapped on the other side. Every impact through the wall told me the second scorpion was still attacking them. I had no sword. Flash Step Slash needed one, so the rule was simple. Stop the controller before her remote puppet reached Alyssa. The woman dropped from the ceiling and landed over me. Black threads ran from her fingers into the walls, twitching with every distant crash. She was tall, armored from the waist down, and dangerously pleased with the view beneath her boot. In my defense, I noticed the legs because one was about to crush my head. She pressed her heel beside my ear. "Mallory Fitch, remember the name while my puppets tear your people apart." That gave me her name, her job, and a very rude deadline. A smaller scorpion puppet crawled from the dark behind her. Its shell scraped both walls. The tail rose over my chest. Conrad's doubled stats were still inside me. My weapon was gone, so I used the oldest skill in human history. I punched it. My fist went through the puppet's center plate. The shell burst apart behind Mallory. Broken legs hit the ceiling. The tail spun once and stuck point first in the floor. Mallory's smile thinned. She looked at the hole in her puppet, then at my F-rank badge. "Filthy human," Mallory snapped. "What did you do?" I pulled my arm free, made a correction. She moved before I could stand. Mallory's knee hit my shoulder. Her other leg hooked around my neck and drove my face against the stone. The position would have been embarrassing under normal circumstances. These circumstances were trying to break my skull. Heartlock pulsed across my vision. "Target available, Mallory Fitch!" I locked her. Her fingers jerked. A crash answered from the other side of the rubble. Then Mallory tightened her leg around my head and laughed. "Your strength means nothing down there. Humans belong under monsters." The Heartlock meter rose. Defense increased. I pushed against her ankle. It did not move. "That meter thinks you're enjoying this," I told her. Mallory's grip tightened. "Your meter is defective." Agitation increased. The meter exposes every liar eventually. Mallory had started fast. On the far side, Aaron later told me, the B-plus puppet hit the squad like a moving wall. Aaron put the remaining shields in front and the archers behind. One volley struck the scorpion's face and bounced into the ceiling. The puppet drove through the shields anyway. Alyssa heard my first impact through the rubble. She abandoned the formation and ran toward the collapse on her injured leg. Aaron caught her arm. "Alyssa, stay behind the shields." Alyssa ripped free. "Liam is behind that wall." The puppet's tail came down at her back. Aaron shoved Alyssa aside and caught the strike on his sword. The blade bent. His boots carved 2 lines through the floor. That choice kept her alive and put him directly between Alyssa and the monster. Back in my chamber, Mallory leaned harder into the hold. I had no weapon, no room, and one useful target attached to my face. "Look, pride is expensive." I was already dying. I bit her foot. Mallory froze. I bit harder, then dragged my tongue across the edge of her boot when she refused to move. Her whole body recoiled. The remote threads snapped tight. Heartlock stacked 3 notifications across my vision. Agility increased. Attack increased. Target agitation, 41%. I rolled free before she could kick me through the wall. The broken puppet tail was still buried beside us. I tore the stinger loose and held the jagged plate like a short blade. It was ugly, heavy, and technically longer than my missing sword. Progress. Mallory snapped 2 fingers. 3 loose scorpion legs rose on black threads and stabbed at me from different angles. I ducked the first, knocked the second into the wall, and cut the 3rd thread with the stinger. The leg dropped. Mallory flinched as if the cut had crossed her own skin. That gave me the first clean clue. The puppets were extensions of her body. Hurt the control, and every battlefield moved with it. Mallory stared at me as if I had insulted her entire bloodline. I wiped my mouth. Terrible flavor. Effective result. "Animal," Mallory hissed. I pointed at the rising meter. "Still climbing!" On the far side, her B-plus puppet gave the first real malfunction. Its front legs wobbled. The tail that had Aaron pinned missed his shoulder and buried itself in the floor. Aaron cut Alyssa loose from the cracked shields and dragged her back. One tank tried to capitalize and rammed his shield into the puppet's side. The monster recovered enough to sweep him across the corridor. Aaron caught the man's armor before he hit the laser-scarred wall. Vaughn stayed behind both of them until the tail was stuck. Then he rushed in late. Captain Credit slashed across the puppet's face after Aaron had already moved everyone clear. The shell sparked. The monster staggered. Vaughn lifted his sword. "My pressure is breaking its control. Keep attacking." Aaron looked at the rubble instead of Vaughn. Vaughn looked at the squad instead of the rubble. The impact shook Mallory's strings. Her eyes flicked toward the wall. That was enough. I grabbed the severed scorpion tail and swung the armored segment at her ribs. Mallory blocked it with one shin. The force pushed her sideways. I followed with a punch. She twisted around it, caught my wrist, and kicked me into the ceiling. I hit stone, dropped, and landed on one knee. Mallory's threads shook with her breathing. "You touched me with your mouth," she growled. I raised the broken tail like a club. "You put your foot on my face." We both made choices. Her cheeks warmed. Her expression became murderous. Heartlock paid both reactions. Defense increased. Agility increased. Mallory rushed me. I swung the stinger for her shoulder. She caught the plate between both palms and twisted. The jagged edge tore one glove and opened her grip for half a second. I drove my forehead into hers. Mallory answered with a knee to my ribs and a heel against my spine. She trapped the scorpion segment under one foot, drove an elbow into my chest, and folded me against the wall. The threads around her fingers trembled harder. My defense rose again, but the wall still hurt. Heartlock was generous. Construction remained hostile. On the other side, her puppets suffered the second malfunction. The entire body collapsed onto one side. Aaron shouted for the squad to back away. Vaughn ignored him and planted both boots on the fallen shell. Vaughn raised his sword over the puppet's neck. "Watch carefully. This is how an A rank finishes a boss." He struck the same cracked plate 3 times. The puppet stopped moving. Several exhausted soldiers cheered. One called Vaughn the strongest man in the dungeon. Vaughn accepted that title immediately. Of course he did. Captain Credit could steal praise from gravity. Aaron kept staring at the rubble instead of the captain. Alyssa pushed past him again. Aaron caught her around the waist before she reached the broken wall. "If you climb that, the puppet wakes and kills you." Alyssa drove an elbow into his armor. Then help me open it. Aaron's jaw tightened. He turned and started pulling stone with her. Jealous, loyal, and still useful. He was having a rough afternoon. The threads around Mallory's fingers snapped tight as Alyssa and Aaron pulled at the wall. She slammed me down and pressed a knee between my shoulders. I will kill them first, Mallory whispered. Then I will teach you what filthy means. Alyssa was on the other side of that wall, so I stopped playing. I gripped Mallory's ankle and started to rise with her weight still on my back. Then a woman's voice came through the threads from deeper inside Blackridge. Mallory, why is my door still open? Mallory went pale. The woman behind that voice was Rowena Cade, the boss guarding the cure. I only knew the name because Mallory whispered it like a prayer and a threat. Rowena, Mallory breathed. Her panic hit every puppet string at once. On the far side, the scorpion rose from its false finish. Its tail whipped Vaughn off the shell and launched him into his own soldiers. The squad's cheers turned into a retreat. One soldier pulled Vaughn out of the pile, left him there, and moved behind Aaron. 2 more followed. Nobody waited for the captain's order. Mallory sprang off my back, spread both hands, and pulled every thread tight. The remote puppet reared over Alyssa and Aaron. Heartlock flashed the number I needed. Attack! 10,000! I stood fully. The stone under my feet split. A pressure wave blew dust from the chamber walls and rattled the loose puppet pieces across the floor. Mallory looked at me, then at the attack number reflected in my eyes. I took 1 step toward her. The floor dented. Mallory took 2 steps back. Still filthy? I asked. Mallory's mouth opened. The insult never arrived. She cut her own threads and fled through a crack near the ceiling. The remote puppet dropped before its tail reached Alyssa. Aaron kept his bent sword raised for 3 breaths. Alyssa did not wait. She shoved both hands into the rubble and started pulling stones toward herself. Vaughn ordered her back. Alyssa ignored him so completely that 2 soldiers joined her. Aaron joined next. The captain's authority was losing pieces faster than the wall. I could have chased Mallory. The Blackridge map showed the cure beyond Rowena's door, and every extra fight spent time my body did not have, so I turned toward the wall instead. 1 punch opened a hole through the rubble. Alyssa came through first. She grabbed my face, checked both eyes, then ran her hands over my shoulders for injuries. You're alive, Alyssa breathed. Mostly, I told her. My dignity lost a fight with a boot. Aaron climbed through behind her and watched her hands stay on me. Aaron sheathed his bent sword. He looks fine. Alyssa did not look away from me. I wasn't checking your opinion. Aaron's mouth shut. Mallory was gone, but apparently Heartlock had left collateral damage in the room. Vaughn pushed through the hole last, covered in dust and fake importance. 1 soldier helped him stand. Another praised the strike that had supposedly dropped the puppet. Vaughn wiped blood from his lip and pointed at the dead shell. My signature attack broke its core. Aaron looked at him. It collapsed when something hit the other side of the wall. Vaughn stepped closer. Are you questioning an A-rank victory? Aaron glanced at me, then at the hole I had punched. I'm questioning the timing. Vaughn turned to the squad before anyone else joined him. The Guardian is dead, he announced. The true boss is next. I will lead from the front and finish it alone. Vaughn tapped the captain bars on his ruined armor. 1 clean boss kill, and these bars get upgraded. The soldiers who had just cheered him straightened again. False praise had gone directly to his brain. No filtering. Tragic. Mallory later told me what happened after she fled. She reached Rowena's chamber and warned her that an F-rank human had crossed 10,000 attack. Rowena answered with 1 blast. The beam threw Mallory onto a mound of burned bodies beneath a stone altar. Humans and monsters were stacked together, feeding a fire under green demon god blood. Rowena looked down at her injured guard. Thousands became fuel. You left my door for 1 human. Mallory tried to rise. Rowena kicked her back onto the corpses. That was what waited behind the door. At that point, all I could see was the cure marker burning across the Blackridge map. Vaughn planted 1 boot against the boss room door. Captain Credit lifted his sword. Watch how the strongest man in Blackridge handles a C-rank boss. Then he kicked Rowena's door open. Vaughn kicked the boss room door open and marched in before anyone else could stop him. The floor dropped toward a stone altar filled with green demon god blood. Burned bodies surrounded it in black layers, and fresh corpses fed the fire beneath. Rowena Cade stood between me and the cure. She was Mallory's boss, masked and waiting beside the boiling altar. She looked at Vaughn like noise. A burned monster slid from the corpse pile. Rowena caught it with 1 foot and pushed it back into the fire. The green blood bubbled higher. The temperature was falling, Rowena told us. Thank you for bringing fresh fuel. Alyssa tightened her grip. Aaron stopped treating the room like a rank mistake. The altar burned people as fuel. Vaughn had delivered more. Rowena barely looked at him. Vaughn smiled anyway. Captain Credit spread his arms. Your daddy is here. Everyone stand back and watch me solo, the C-rank boss. Aaron stopped beside me. That room killed thousands. Vaughn glanced at the bodies. Then thousands were weak. Vaughn stared at the corpse fire and still made it about himself. He tugged open the collar of his A-rank breastplate. Black scales covered his chest beneath it. Vaughn tapped the hidden layer. My older brother gave me S-rank protection. Nothing in this C-rank hole can touch me. The armor was the only part of that speech I believed. Vaughn raised his sword and charged. He crossed half the room shouting his own rank. His remaining guards shouted after him. Rowena stayed still. Vaughn swung for her neck. Rowena lifted one finger. A beam no wider than her thumb crossed the chamber. Vaughn's A-rank armor vanished from shoulders to waist. The blast launched him backward and buried him in the doorframe. His sword hit the floor first. The black S-rank scales underneath glowed red, cracked, and kept him alive. One of his sleeves ended empty below the wrist. Vaughn had entered, calling himself Rowena's daddy. 1 finger later, he had lost his armor, his sword, and a hand. The guard who had shouted his rank stopped with his mouth open. Another soldier backed toward the door before Vaughn even stood. That confidence lasted beautifully. Rowena lowered her finger. Was that the strongest man in Blackridge? Nobody answered for him. Vaughn tried anyway. He pointed his remaining hand at her and forced a laugh. Cheap trick. You surprised me once. Rowena looked at the empty sleeve. I counted 2 surprises. A soldier behind Vaughn lowered his weapon. He had heard the boast. Now he was staring at Vaughn's empty sleeve. Vaughn pulled himself from the stone with his remaining hand. His face twisted when the squad looked at the empty sleeve. Aaron moved beside the surviving fighters. Defensive line! Shield spread! We pull back through the door and make her cross the choke point. It was the only sensible plan in the room. Vaughn's face tightened when Aaron gave the smarter order. He pointed his remaining hand at Rowena. Full charge! Every fighter forward! Aaron did not move. That beam crossed the room before he finished swinging. Vaughn stepped close enough to spray dust from his ruined armor. A captain is the solid support of his team. You will obey. Then he moved behind the formation. Look, I genuinely do not know what he thought support meant. He called himself the team's shield while hiding behind the people he had ordered forward. The squad rushed because refusing him still carried a sentence. The shield line moved first. Archers followed with nowhere safe to shoot. A wounded fighter tried to stay back, and Vaughn grabbed his collar with his remaining hand. Forward! Vaughn ordered. The man looked at the empty sleeve beside Vaughn's chest. He obeyed anyway. Rowena waited until they reached the center, then she opened her hand. Green light spread across the chamber. The front line disappeared inside it. Armor burned white. People dropped before their weapons reached her. The fighters behind them tried to stop. Vaughn shoved 2 more forward and yelled for everyone to keep moving. One shieldman turned and tried to pull a younger soldier back. The second wave hit both shields. Their weapons fell. Neither man rose. Rowena swept the beam sideways. Alyssa's injured leg buckled. Aaron caught her, but the next wave came straight at both of them. I crossed the room and hit them from the side. The blast took the space we had occupied. Heat tore the back from Aaron's armor and threw all 3 of us behind a broken pillar. Alyssa landed against me. Aaron rolled once and came up on one knee. Around us, the charge ended in bodies and burning equipment. Nobody cheered. Nobody moved toward Rowena again. People were dead because Vaughn answered his humiliation by ordering them forward. Vaughn shouted, "Retreat!" He was already running. A low-ranked soldier limped across his path. Vaughn seized the man's shoulder and tried to drag him between Rowena and the doorway. I hit Vaughn's wrist away before the soldier became another shield. The captain who had ordered the charge reached the door before the survivors he had spent. I caught the back of his S-rank undersuit. Vaughn swung his remaining elbow toward my face. I took the hit and pulled him backward. "Release me," Vaughn barked. "That is an order." Rowena raised her hand again. The survivors were still crossing open ground. I looked at Vaughn's empty sleeve, then at the people he had left behind. "You called yourself solid support?" I told him. Vaughn's eyes widened. "Liam, don't!" The people he burned did not get to retreat. He did not get to either. I turned and threw him into Rowena's beam. The blast struck the black scales across his back. Vaughn became a screaming shield between Rowena and his own squad. The beam pushed him across the chamber. The S-rank undersuit held long enough for the remaining fighters to reach the corridor. Vaughn clawed at the floor with his remaining hand. His boots dug trenches through the ash. Every person he had ordered forward ran past behind his burning armor. Then the impact launched Vaughn through the doorway and into the retreating line. His own boast had become safety equipment. Solid support, finally accurate. The survivors dragged themselves into the hall. Several stepped around Vaughn without helping him. One man reached toward the captain, saw the bodies behind us, and lowered his hand. Another pulled the wounded low-rank soldier past Vaughn without asking permission. Aaron looked down at his captain. Then he kicked Vaughn's sword away from Vaughn's remaining hand. Alyssa leaned against the pillar and raised her sword. "I'm staying with Liam." I looked at her bleeding leg. "You are collecting terrible decisions." Alyssa adjusted her grip. "I learned from you." Aaron moved to her other side. "I'm staying too." Vaughn lifted his head from the corridor. "Vice Captain, that is desertion." Aaron looked back once. "You deserted us first." Then he turned his back on the captain. Vaughn still had the badge. Aaron had stopped obeying it. I glanced between them. This is becoming a very crowded heroic sacrifice. Aaron's mouth tightened. You don't own the concept. Alyssa looked at him. Neither does Vaughn. The last survivors cleared the room. Aaron pushed the broken door inward and blocked part of the opening with debris. Rowena did not chase them. She turned back toward the altar and fed another body into the green fire. The blood boiled harder. That was my cure. Every second beside Rowena made it uglier and harder to reach. I activated Flash Step Slash and crossed the space before her next beam formed. The skill carried me past her shoulder. I cut across her mask, but the broken weapon in my hand only sparked against it. Rowena turned late enough for Aaron to strike her back. Alyssa drove her blade toward Rowena's knee. Rowena kicked it aside. That opened one narrow lane to the altar. I took it. I landed at the altar and reached for the green blood. A transparent wall hit my palm. The barrier exploded outward. I flew across the room and broke through the pillar beside Alyssa. Rowena watched me stand. No living creature crosses that barrier while I remain alive. One rule, one problem. The Blackridge map showed me the altar. Killing Rowena was still my job. Rowena touched the barrier with one finger. It brightened around the basin. Kill me, and perhaps you drink. Fail, and your friends become heat. She dragged a fallen body closer with her foot. Alyssa saw it and moved before Rowena could feed the fire. Aaron attacked from her left. Alyssa threw her damaged sword from the right. Rowena turned toward them. I rushed her again and caught the next beam on my forearm. My boosted defense held, but the impact drove me backward. Aaron struck from behind. Rowena caught his sword at the guard and threw him across the room. Alyssa stepped into the opening and cut Rowena's sleeve. Rowena's mask snapped toward Alyssa. That was when a movement inside the wall caught my eye. Mallory was hiding in a cracked opening near the corpse mound. Rowena's earlier blast had torn her armor and left her unable to stand. Mallory saw me looking and bared her teeth. Leave me! I still had one kale mushroom wrapped inside my ruined belt. The second one from the corridor. Vaughn had eaten its unlucky brother. I slid the mushroom into the wall beside Mallory. Monster food, I told her. Try not to steal it from yourself. Mallory stared at the mushroom. I do not need human pity. Good, I answered. Then call it theft. Alyssa shouted my name as Rowena drove Aaron through another pillar. I turned away from Mallory and ran. Behind me, I heard one quiet bite. Mallory chewed fast and hid the evidence deeper in the wall. A little color returned to her face. One black thread curled around the mushroom wrapper and pulled it out of sight. Heartlock chimed. Mallory Fitch. Favorability increased. The number climbed hard enough to make Mallory look away from me. She still scowled, but she ate every bite. Heartlock, trusted actions. Sensible machine, terrible timing. Weapon card function unlocked. A stack of glowing cards opened across my vision, while Alyssa blocked Rowena with a sword that had already cracked twice. System HR began a speech. Weapon cards convert target favorability into randomized combat assets. Selection rules follow. I cut it off. Skip. Please confirm tutorial. Skip. Rowena knocked Alyssa's sword aside. I slapped the prompt away. Confirmed. Give me anything with an edge. The card stack spun. I slapped the first one that stopped. A silver blade dropped into my hand. Weapon acquired. Wardrobe breaker. The name should have worried me. Alyssa was about to take a beam so quality control could file a complaint later. I hit Rowena from behind. The blade touched her outer battle robe and left one shallow line. Rowena caught the sword between two fingers. She looked at the scratch, then she looked at me. Rowena tilted the trapped blade. That is your answer? I pulled. The sword did not move. The card was random, I admitted. Rowena finally smiled. Then your system wants you dead. Her outer robe exploded. Dark fabric burst away from her shoulders and spun across the chamber. A fitted battle layer remained underneath, along with a look that promised creative violence. One strip landed across Aaron's face. He pulled it off slowly and looked at me. You picked that? Aaron demanded. I kept both hands on the trapped sword. Random card. Alyssa blinked once. Of course it was. Rowena looked down at herself. I looked at the sword. Beautiful. My rescue weapon had chosen humiliation as its damage type. Heartlock displayed the condition. Wardrobe breaker, mark 1 of 3. Strike leg guard and mask to unlock finisher, skyblade drop. Aaron recovered his sword. 3 marks? Leg guard and mask, I told him. Alyssa shifted closer to Rowena's blind side. Then stop admiring your work. I raised wardrobe breaker. In my defense, the work exploded. Rowena tore the loose fabric from one arm. Her eyes moved from me to Alyssa. I shifted between them. Rowena raised one finger. This time, she stopped aiming at me. She aimed at Alyssa. Inside Rowena's boss room, she had stopped looking at me. She was aiming at Alyssa. I moved before her finger did. Wardrobe breaker had marked Rowena's robe. I still needed her leg guard and mask. Flash Step Slash gave me 6 uses, then locked for 10 seconds after each one. I spent the first use on her left leg. Rowena lifted her knee. My blade missed the guard, and her heel hit my face on the way down. I crossed the room and struck the altar barrier hard enough to light it. Flash step, slash, 5 uses remaining. Cooldown, 10 seconds. 10 seconds sounds short until a boss is trying to erase your oldest friend. Rowena crossed the room before the count reached 9. Aaron attacked her exposed side. She threw him away without looking. Alyssa tried to rise on her injured leg, and her knee folded. Then Rowena fired at me. I raised Wardrobe Breaker. The ridiculous sword caught the beam and split it around me. One half burned past Aaron, the other cut through the corpse mound. Aaron stared at the blade. That thing can block her? Apparently it respects violence more than clothing. Rowena's mask turned toward the sword. Good, I needed her angry and looking at me. The cooldown cleared. I flashed toward her mask. She leaned back 1 inch. The blade missed the metal and tore a strip from her hood. Flash step, slash, 4 uses remaining. Her knee caught my ribs and threw me sideways. Alyssa rushed her flank while Aaron attacked from behind. Rowena swept both weapons away and drove them toward the same pillar. I caught Alyssa. Aaron hit the stone beside us and lost the rest of his breastplate. Rowena watched me catch Alyssa. Her mask turned toward her. She stopped firing at me. Rowena pointed at Alyssa. A black nail extended over her fingertip and filled with green light. I crossed the room without flash step and slashed the nail. Wardrobe Breaker snapped it off. The beam had already left. Alyssa stood directly in its path. Aaron threw himself beside her, trying to cover the same body I was trying to reach. My cooldown still showed 6 seconds. Heartlock showed 1 legal loophole. A fresh target could refresh flash step slash once. The system did not care whether that target wanted me dead or had known me since childhood. I looked at Alyssa. Sorry, I said. Then I locked her. Target locked, Alyssa Benton. Fresh target, flash step slash refreshed. I activated the skill. The room became one white line. I reached Alyssa and Aaron before the beam. Wardrobe Breaker met the blast at arm's length. The impact shattered the remaining armor across all 3 of us and drove us into the floor. The beam split against the sword and passed overhead. Aaron's shattered shoulder plates spun across the room. Alyssa's last chest plate cracked down the center. My ruined guild coat caught fire at one sleeve. I slapped the flame out and looked down. Alyssa opened her eyes under me. Heartlock opened a different problem. Target agitation, 38%. Alyssa grabbed both sides of my face. Her eyes moved to my mouth. Oh boy, I knew that look. I had seen the childhood version right before I abandoned our chalk family and sprinted across a schoolyard. Alyssa pulled me closer. Hold still, I leaned back. This is a terrible time for childhood closure. Her mouth curved despite the smoke. You remember? Aaron pushed himself upright beside us. Why is Alyssa trying to kiss you during a boss fight? I kept my hands between Alyssa and my face. Heartlock has terrible workplace boundaries. Aaron looked at the glowing altar, then at us. That did not answer me. Rowena answered for me by throwing a broken pillar. I rolled Alyssa aside. Aaron cut the stone in half, and both pieces crashed where our heads had been. Rowena stepped toward the altar. Green flame climbed around her arm. I can burn the blood before you take it, she warned. The cure level inside the stone basin began dropping. That gave us a deadline and removed my remaining shame. I caught Alyssa's hand. Strong feelings raise my stats. A kiss, a hug, anything with enough force might give me what I need. Aaron stared at me. Your battle plan is asking Alyssa to make out with you? I told him. I prefer combat support. Aaron cut me off. I prefer you stop talking. Alyssa stepped between us. Can it save everyone? I met her eyes. It can give me a chance. Alyssa grabbed my collar and pulled me down. Then take the chance. Her voice stayed steady. She was scared, injured, and choosing the plan herself. Aaron's sword hand tightened. Heartlock noticed him before I did. Alyssa lifted her face. My 8-year-old panic came back fully trained and professionally useless. I put both hands on her shoulders and pushed her away. Alyssa stumbled 1 step. The hurt on her face hit harder than Rowena's kick. Aaron looked from her to me. His expression broke in 3 separate directions. He had protected Alyssa through the whole dungeon. Now his sword hand tightened, and his eyes stayed on the hurt across her face. Heartlock chimed immediately. Jealous witness detected. Critical emotional hit. Level increased. All stats increased by 5,000. System HR had rewarded me for ruining 2 relationships in one motion. Efficient. Morally radioactive. Alyssa's agitation jumped. Target agitation, 99%. Alyssa stared at me. You asked me, then shoved me? I admitted. I panicked. Alyssa snapped. You are an adult. I glanced at Rowena. The evidence is mixed. Aaron raised his sword toward me. After we survive, I may hit you. I lifted Wardrobe Breaker. Get in line. Rowena reached the altar and drove both hands into the green fire. The room darkened around her. Every corpse beneath the basin cracked with light. The blood rose in a spinning column. Rowena faced us through the glow. "You brought me more fuel and called it rescue." Then she released everything. A green blast filled the room. I used the plus 5,000 surge to plant wardrobe breaker in front of Alyssa and Aaron. The sword held. My magic did not. The blast dragged every point out of me as I forced it aside. Pillars broke. The ceiling opened. Aaron disappeared behind flying stone. Alyssa's hand slipped from my shoulder. The beam ended. Wardrobe breaker had cut a trench through the stone under my boots. My arms shook so hard I nearly dropped it. Aaron lay against the far wall. Alyssa crawled toward me with one hand, refusing to stay where the blast left her. I dropped to one knee. Heartlock put the number in front of me. Magic. 11. 11 points. Flash Step Slash was available. I could not afford it. Wardrobe breaker still needed 2 marks. Rowena was standing. Alyssa and Aaron were barely moving. I had 11 magic, 2 unfinished marks, and Rowena walking toward us. Rowena walked toward me and lifted one hand for the final beam. Alyssa moved first. She grabbed the back of my ruined shirt, pulled me against her armor, and locked both arms around me. My face hit the front of her breastplate. Alyssa held me there. "You promised to take responsibility when we were kids." I stopped fighting her grip. Alyssa tightened the embrace. "I have trusted you since then, so stop deciding for me now." Aaron dragged himself from the rubble and saw us, his sword lowered. He looked at Alyssa's arms around me. Heartlock filled my vision with alerts. Target agitation, 100%. Critical relationship hit. Jealous witness multiplier, 5 levels gained. All stats increased by 27,500. Power flooded back through every bruised muscle. The broken floor sank under my boots. Dust lifted from my shoulders and hung in the air. Rowena stopped advancing. Aaron looked at the stat glow, then at Alyssa's arms still around me. His mouth tightened. Alyssa had held that childhood promise longer than I had understood it. I stood with her still against me. Rowena fired. I moved. The beam crossed empty air. My first strike hit Rowena's leg guard. The metal burst into fragments. Wardrobe breaker, mark 2 of 3. Rowena spun and threw a second beam. I cut through it and reached her mask before the light closed. The blade tapped the metal once. The mask split down the center and flew from her face. Wardrobe breaker, mark 3 of 3. Rowena's expression changed from rage to fear. Heartlock gave me the finisher. Skyblade, drop unlocked. The ceiling above us turned white. Rowena dragged every remaining corpse into the altar flame. Green blood rose behind her in a wall. She threw the full force at me. I lifted wardrobe breaker and activated Skyblade drop. A white blade wider than the altar fell through the boss room. It met Rowena's beam in the center. The collision erased the pillars, the corpse mound, and most of the chamber wall. The floor buckled under the altar. Light filled every crack in Blackridge. Then the pressure broke forward. Rowena hit the far wall and dropped unconscious. Her mask fragments struck the altar steps. Wardrobe breaker's loose strips settled across the ruined floor. The barrier around the blood flickered for the first time. The green beam vanished. For one breath, nobody attacked. Aaron stared at the sword in my hand. His bent weapon slipped from his fingers. Alyssa smiled once, then her knees failed. I caught her before she hit the floor. Skyblade drop hit. Rowena was down. I ran for the demon god blood before the barrier recovered. The basin was 3 steps away. Heartlock flashed 2 warnings. Alyssa Benton, critical. Aaron Keats, critical. Behind me, stones scraped. Rowena stood again. Half her battle layer was gone. Her breathing shook. Her hand still reached toward the altar. Skyblade drop flashed its own cost. Cooldown, 20 seconds. I could finish Rowena when the timer ended. Alyssa and Aaron did not have 20 seconds. The cure boiled within reach. 6 months of poison, 1 missing finger, and every attack in Blackridge led to that basin. Alyssa coughed behind me. I had wanted that cure for 6 months. Alyssa had trusted me longer. I turned away from the altar. Rowena laughed through broken breath. "Coward!" I lifted Alyssa with one arm and Aaron with the other. "Keep it hot," I told her. "I'm coming back." Then I ran. With Alyssa and Aaron in my arms, the Blackridge map drew one route upward. The shortest path cut through 3 monster nests and the dragon guarding the upper shaft. I took it anyway. The first pack rushed the narrow tunnel. I hit the lead monster with my shoulder and drove the rest into the wall without putting either ally down. A second creature dropped from the ceiling. I caught its jaw with wardrobe breaker and threw it behind me. 2 more chased us across a cracked bridge. I kicked the support behind my heel. The bridge dropped after we crossed and carried both monsters into the lower dark. The dragon blocked the final stairwell with both wings spread. Smoke rolled from its mouth and filled the only exit. I had no free hands, so I jumped. My boosted shoulder struck under its chest. The dragon left the stairwell, hit the gate above, and tore it open for us. Its tail caught my back as I passed. The hit drove me to one knee, but I kept both allies off the floor. I stood before the dragon recovered and ran through the torn gate. I landed on the next level with Alyssa still against my side and Aaron hanging over my other shoulder. Alyssa drifted in and out while I ran. She told me later that the schoolyard returned in pieces. The boy I slapped. The chalk house! My hand pulling her across the line. Her eyes opened once against my shoulder. You said you'd take responsibility, Alyssa whispered. I answered, I remember. Alyssa tightened her hand on my shirt. Then don't drop me. I tightened my arm around her. You're not dying before I finish the job. Her eyes closed again. Her grip stayed on my torn shirt. Behind us, the boss level flashed green. The tunnel floor heaved. A shockwave raced up the stairs and folded stone behind my heels. 2 floors separated me from the altar. All I could feel was Blackridge beginning to collapse. The dragon roared behind the falling gate. The upper path cracked open ahead. I ran through it. At the dungeon exit, guild medics were loading survivors onto stretchers. Vaughn stood beside them in ruined S-rank scales. One sleeve was empty. His remaining hand still held his captain badge. He saw me carrying Alyssa and Aaron and smiled like he had found one last person to punish. Vaughn blocked the medical team. Those 3 deserted the squad. No guild treatment. A medic hesitated because the badge was still real. Alyssa's breathing stopped for one terrible beat. I did not slow down. My kick hit Vaughn in the chest and folded him across the threshold. The badge flew from his hand. He hit the ground unconscious. I stepped on his armor to clear the doorway and carried Alyssa and Aaron straight to the waiting stretchers. The medic who had hesitated caught Alyssa first. Another team took Aaron. Both critical, I told them. Move. They moved. The medics moved. Paperwork and captain's permission could catch up after Alyssa kept breathing. Alyssa's hand slipped from my shirt as the stretcher rolled away. I stood there long enough to see both doors close. Then I turned back toward Blackridge. The cure was still mine if the altar had survived. Less than an hour later, I reached the lower route again. The underground level had collapsed. A crack split the boss room from floor to ceiling. The corpse mound was gone. The altar had broken down the middle. Every trace of green demon god blood was gone. I left the cure boiling behind me to save 2 people. When I came back, the cure had learned how to open doors. Still inside Blackridge's collapsed boss room, I watched the Blackridge map give the empty altar a direction. A red signal pulsed deeper through a passage that had not existed before. The cure I had left boiling was moving. I followed it. The first chamber held 6 dead monsters on their knees. None had battle wounds. Their bodies had simply stopped where they bowed. A black scorpion tail punched through the dust beside my head. I caught it with both hands. Mallory Fitch dropped from the cracked ceiling and kicked at my throat. I turned the tail, blocked her shin, and shoved her against the wall. The last time I saw Mallory, she was broken and hiding inside a wall. Now every wound had closed. A red mark circled her wrist under the skin. Heartlock opened her status before she could hide it. Mallory Fitch favorability, 71%. Mallory saw my eyes move and snapped. Stop reading that defective meter. I held her tail away from my ribs. 71% says you like the mushroom. Mallory bared her teeth. I hated it. You ate the wrapper. Her cheeks warmed. Favorability increased. The meter exposed every liar eventually. Mallory remained one of its easiest customers. She yanked the tail free and stepped between me and the red signal. Turn around, Mallory warned. She was blocking my cure and warning me at the same time. I pointed at the healed armor along her side. Start with what fixed you. Mallory's red wrist mark pulsed. Her knees almost folded. She grabbed the wall until the pain passed, then looked toward the sealed passage behind her. Rowena used herself, Mallory admitted. After you escaped, the altar cooled. She climbed into the blood and became the last fuel. She pointed toward the basin. Black residue still clung to the rim where Rowena had disappeared. The blood rose, Mallory continued. Avery Crowell stepped out. Your antidote became a person. Mallory's jaw tightened. Avery asked where Rowena was. I pointed at the basin. Avery had looked once. Then she served her purpose. I asked what Avery did first. Mallory pointed at the crack running from the altar through 3 chambers. Touched the floor. Blackridge broke. The surviving monsters had crawled out and offered service. The kneeling bodies around us showed how that interview went. Mallory nudged the first corpse with one boot. Avery called him ugly. I looked at the second. Also ugly, Mallory said. Brutal hiring policy. Mallory touched the red mark under her wrist. Avery chose me. I was broken, so I got blood instead. The mark pulsed. Heat ran beneath her skin. Mallory's breath caught, and her knees shook while the last split in her armor sealed. Her healed fingers tightened against the wall. Then the same mark flashed brighter and dropped her to one knee. Mallory forced the words out. The blood repairs me. Avery can also dissolve me through it. If I move more than 5 miles away, I die. If Avery opens the wound, I feel the same cut. Healing and unleash, very on brand for my living antidote. Gray, pre-dawn light reached through a crack in the ceiling. Mallory saw it and grabbed my sleeve. At night, Avery has a weak female body, she warned. Sunrise brings the powerful male form. That is the form that broke this dungeon. The light climbed another stone. Mallory pointed at the final chamber. Leave before it reaches the door. That gave me minutes. I released the tail and ran. Mallory moved to block me. Her claw stopped an inch from my chest. Her favorability meter ticked upward again. I looked at the claw, then at her. Terrifying commitment. I am obeying, Mallory hissed. You're missing. She slashed again. I stepped inside the swing and caught her wrist. The Blackridge map showed a narrow strip along the wall, so I used it. Mallory twisted after me, but the red mark flared and pulled her attention toward the final chamber. That hesitation gave me the door. The last signal waited behind it. The red pulse jumped each time I got closer. By the door, it matched the heartbeat inside my ribs. Mallory's tail struck the wall behind me. Stones sprayed past my shoulder. Last warning, she called. I kept one hand on the door. You used the first two badly. Before I could touch the handle, the door opened inward. A pale woman stood on the other side wearing a black coat far too large for her frame. Silver hair fell over one eye. Her face was beautiful. The 6 rejected monsters behind me were still dead. This was Avery Crowell's weeknight form, the living thing born from Rowena's altar. Avery fixed me with a cold, possessive stare. So, Avery murmured, my heart learned to walk. I reached for the closing door. Avery stepped forward at the same time. My palm landed against Avery's chest. In my defense, the door had terrible timing. A white spark detonated between us. The impact threw Mallory backward and drove me against the opposite wall. A second pulse hit inside my ribs, directly behind the Heartlock screen. Something answered from my system core. Avery's calm expression cracked. Heartlock filled my vision. Demon God essence detected. Missing heart essence located inside current host. Demon God blood identified Avery Crowell. The thing that could save me had a face. That face wanted my body empty. Avery crossed the room and grabbed my shirt. Give it back. I caught Avery's wrist. You mean the heart inside my system? It belonged to me before your species learned how to name this city. Avery pressed 2 fingers against my sternum. Red light gathered beneath them. I felt the light reach for Heartlock. I also felt what would happen if it pulled the essence free. My skin started breaking into pale sparks around Avery's hand. I shoved the arm away. That dissolves me. Avery smiled. Yes, very honest. Terrible bedside manner. Avery reached for Heartlock again. I needed the blood inside Avery before Avery pulled the heart out of me. So I tested it before daylight changed the fight. I grabbed a sharp shard from the broken altar, caught Avery's palm, and opened one shallow cut. Avery stared at the blood. You dare? I've been dying for 6 months. My manners expired first. I drank before Avery could pull away. Heat hit my tongue and rushed through my chest. The purple poison under my skin recoiled. For 1 second, I thought it worked. Then the poison surged back harder. I coughed purple blood across the floor. Heartlock placed the answer in front of me. Detoxification failed. Estimated life remaining, 101 days. 101 days. The cure had become a person, and the person's blood was useless in the wrong body. Avery examined the cut, then watched it close. This form is human enough to survive the night, Avery explained. Its blood carries none of my full power. Avery caught my jaw and studied the purple stain on my mouth. 101 days, you should be grateful. I knocked the hand away. I only need 1 good day. The red light returned around Avery's fingers and reached for my chest again. I trapped the wrist against the broken door and drove my shoulder forward. The weeknight body hit the wall. Mallory's tail rose between us. She aimed the point at me, but the tip shook. Avery glanced at her trembling weapon. Your blood remembers who healed it. Mallory's jaw locked. Her tail lowered 1 inch. Gray pre-dawn light reached the chamber threshold. Avery's shadow lengthened across the floor. At daylight, Avery continued, I can reclaim my heart. You will disappear with it. Mallory rushed between us, scorpion tail raised toward me. Liam, move, she snapped. Avery looked at her. The red mark around Mallory's wrist opened. A matching line appeared across Avery's palm. Mallory dropped to 1 knee, clutching the same wound. I caught Mallory's shoulder before her face hit the stone. She shoved my hand away. I warned you. You also attacked me twice. Mixed message. Mallory glared at me through the pain. Leave anyway. The place I had cut across Avery's palm flashed red. A bell answered beyond the dungeon wall. Avery turned toward the sound. The second ring came closer. The third broke the wall. Black spider legs punched through the stone and ripped the chamber open. Poison steamed across the floor before the dust settled. A woman stepped through the gap with a small black bell tied at her throat. 6 armored spider limbs moved behind her, each tipped with enough poison to end the conversation. She had a gorgeous face and a boss monster's body. In my defense, I prioritized the poison. The newcomer spread both arms toward Avery. My beloved Avery, she breathed. I found you. Avery's expression went flat. Gwen Talbot, kneel. Gwen smiled wider. I missed you too much to kneel, Gwen answered. Let me devour you, then you'll belong only to me. Mallory stared at her. I stared at Avery. Avery looked offended by the quality of available followers. Gwen's bell rang again. Poison spread in a circle around us. She pointed one spider limb at me. That human carries your scent. I will open him after I finish you. Good. The obsessive spider wanted to eat my antidote first and inspect me second. I had seen worse schedules. None came to mind. Gwen lunged. Avery's night form tried to raise one hand. The magic flickered and died. I grabbed Avery around the waist and drove my shoulder through the weakened wall. Avery struck my back. Put me down. Your admirer brought 6 knives and called you dinner. Gwen is not my admirer. A poisoned leg tore through the wall behind us. I jumped over it and followed the Blackridge map into a collapsing side tunnel. She gave a speech, I told Avery. That's an admirer. Gwen screamed after us and gave chase. The map showed 3 routes. 2 ended under poison. I took the third, ran across a broken bridge, and kicked the last support after we cleared it. The bridge dropped between us and Gwen. She caught the edge with 2 spider limbs. The other 4 stabbed into the walls and held her above the drop. Gwen laughed instead of falling. Poison ran down the stone beneath her. Run, little thief, she called. Every drop of Avery's blood points toward you. That explained the bell and ruined my hope of hiding forever. I kept running. Avery weighed almost nothing in the weak form and still twisted in my arms trying to break my grip. You need me alive, Avery said near my ear. Correct. Then stop carrying me under one arm. I jumped a widening crack. Stop making me carry you! Behind us, Gwen's bell rang through the falling stone. The Blackridge map guided me through an upper vent, across the ruined laser corridor, and out before daylight reached the lower chambers. By the time Gwen broke through the last collapse, we were inside Westhaven, the human city surrounding the guild. Early traffic had started around the guild district. Heroes in clean armor stared at my torn clothes, the unconscious-looking woman in my arms, and the purple blood on my chin. Nobody volunteered questions. Smart crowd. Avery opened one eye. Your people are afraid of you. They see purple blood, a missing finger, and you in my arms. Smart people keep walking. Avery almost smiled. Pathetic. You murdered applicants for being ugly. Standards matter. I carried Avery into the residential block beside Westhaven Heroes Guild. Patrols covered the gate and ranked heroes filled the towers. Gwen would have to fight through all of them. The barriers lit as we crossed. Then the guild crest flashed white. Something behind my ribs jerked toward the towers hard enough to stop me. Heartlock flickered. The heart essence inside me burned once, and a second pulse answered from somewhere beyond the gate. Avery's night form hand went to her chest. Her eyes followed the pull from me to the guild crest. Then Avery smiled. You brought me here yourself, she said. The walls could slow Gwen. They also let something sealed inside the guild answer the missing heart inside me. I had carried the living antidote behind Westhaven's strongest defenses. I had also brought Avery within reach of the exact thing she wanted. Before sunrise, I locked Avery inside my apartment beside Westhaven Heroes Guild. Gwen had lost our trail outside Blackridge. I wanted guards, walls, and a few quiet minutes to keep my living antidote alive. Avery wanted something else. Avery's weak night form sat on my couch in the oversized black coat and pressed one hand to her chest. Gwen's poison left a mating curse, Avery announced. This body will die unless you share life force with me before dawn. The rule arrived suspiciously late. Avery opened the code enough to make the sales pitch unfair. The night form was gorgeous, delicate, and clearly designed by someone who hated my judgment. In my defense, I considered the heroic sacrifice for almost 3 seconds. Then, the first line of sunlight crossed the floor. Avery's shoulders widened. The soft voice dropped. Silver hair pulled back from a face becoming sharper by the second. The weak woman on my couch became Avery's powerful male day form. Red light rolled off him and rattled the windows. Far outside, Gwen's black bell answered once. I stepped away so fast the coffee table lost a corner. Avery caught my sleeve. You agreed. I considered it. Avery tightened his grip. Your body moved closer, I told him. My feet moved. Bad call. Avery pulled me toward the couch. Red light gathered under his fingers. The fake curse had one purpose. Close contact gave Avery another chance to reach the heart inside me. I braced one foot against the table and pushed back. A tiny red salamander fell from my torn coat. Red light raced over her scales. Princess Odessa hit the carpet, rolled once, and expanded until a full-sized demon woman stood between us. Her recovered horns nearly struck the ceiling. Her armor had returned in strips, and her eyes went directly to Avery's hand on my sleeve. Odessa's tail snapped around my waist and pulled me away. Master, Odessa declared, feed me. Avery stared at her. I stared at her too. You called me master. Odessa lifted her chin. Do not enjoy it. Too late. Her stomach growled loud enough to shake the broken coffee table. Avery reached for me again. Odessa slapped his hand aside with her tail. I was here first, Odessa warned. Avery's eyes narrowed. You were sleeping in his pocket. Odessa bared her teeth. A superior position. Odessa's tail rose. Avery's aura cracked the cabinet. Both of them looked ready to fight over me in a kitchen I still had to clean. I used hunger as an exit. Food first, I told Odessa. Demon god argument later. Odessa followed me toward the kitchen. Avery followed both of us. Odessa caught the cleaner's sharp smell and detoured into the bathroom. Then I heard liquid pouring. I turned back. She was crouched beside the toilet with a bottle of blue cleaner tilted into her mouth. I took it away. That is poison. Odessa licked one drop from her lip. It is delicious. It removes stains. Then your food should fear it. Look, I had watched this woman fight a demon lord. She still liked toilet cleaner more than my groceries. I carried the bottle to the kitchen and gave her everything edible in the refrigerator. Odessa ate cold meat, half a loaf of bread, and something I had been too afraid to identify last week. Avery leaned against the doorway, now fully in his male day form. My turn, Avery demanded. Odessa looked up from the plate. Wait. Avery's red aura cracked a cabinet door. Odessa kept chewing. I loved the confidence. I also owned the cabinet. Avery crossed the kitchen and caught the front of my shirt. You carried me here, he said. You drank my blood and promised contact, I answered. You lied about dying. Avery tightened his grip. I can still make the exchange pleasant, I told him. You are trying to repossess my organs. Your flirting needs work. Avery pulled. The last intact seam in my shirt ripped from collar to waist. My pants tore at one side when I twisted free. Heartlock chimed. Wardrobe Breaker's 12-hour return cycle ended at that exact second. System HR had returned from lunch. Wardrobe Breaker return cycle complete. Return task. Greet 33 people before the countdown ends. Enhanced stats and system access suspended until completion. Failure. Transfer to punishment realm. My strength vanished. The kitchen floor stopped feeling fragile under my feet. My body dropped all the way back to F rank. Avery still held the remains of my shirt. I had a shredded pair of pants, one strip of fabric, and 33 strangers to greet. The prompt opened one image of the punishment realm. It contained hooks and fire. I chose public humiliation. I wrapped the surviving cloth around my waist, pulled the torn shirt over my face, and ran for the street. Odessa called after me. Master, bring dessert. Avery's voice followed hers. Come back. I kept running. The public square beside the guild was packed with breakfast grills and witnesses. Perfect. I waved at the first vendor. She threw a ladle. Greetings, one of 33. I greeted 2 delivery workers while one covered his eyes and the other called for a guard. By greeting 10, 3 off-duty heroes were chasing me, and a man had raised barbecue tongs like a sword. Honestly, fair. An old man lowered his newspaper, looked straight at me, and raised one slow thumb. Greetings, 11 of 33. I saluted him. He had chosen chaos before breakfast. Respect. I cleared a bench and waved through the crowd. One hero grabbed for the cloth over my face. I ducked, greeted him during the miss, and let him crash into the barbecue tong man. Greetings, 19 of 33. A fruit cart blocked the next lane. I slid across it, greeted the owner, and lost the last respectable piece of my disguise. Greetings, 24 of 33. The owner hurled an orange. I caught it, waved, and kept it. Petty rewards count. A screen from the far side of the square changed the chase. A black spider the size of a motorcycle punched through a grill canopy. Its front leg drove into the pavement where a family had been standing. The crowd scattered. My system stayed locked. F-rank me had no business fighting that thing. I still needed 9 greetings. A street fighter grabbed the spider around its front shell and dragged it away from the civilians. The creature raised its stinger behind him. I ran past and caught his free hand. Morning, I told him. He looked at my covered face, my lack of clothing, and the hand I had stolen during his monster fight. What is wrong with you? He shouted. Greetings, 25 of 33. His grip slipped. The spider threw him into a food stand. An A-rank guild guard crossed the square and cut the spider in half before the stinger landed. The guard turned his sword toward me. Stay down, pervert! I waved at him. Greetings, 26 of 33. His expression became personal. Behind him stood Lowell Grady, the older vice president of Westhaven Heroes Guild. His gold badge had cleared a lane through the panic, and 3 guards were trying to move him toward cover. Lowell saw me and looked exhausted. I waved at the 3 guards while they stared. Greetings, 29 of 33. The black bell rang above us. Gwen landed on the roof of a delivery truck. Her 6 spider limbs unfolded across the metal. Poison dripped from every point and 8 holes through the truck bed. Gwen's eyes locked on Lowell's gold badge. You lead this nest. Where is Avery? The A-rank guard stepped between her and Lowell. Monster, you picked the wrong district. Gwen smiled. You smell weak. She flicked 1 drop of poison. The guard blocked with his sword. The poison ran along the blade, dissolved his gauntlet, and burned through the armor beneath. He dropped before his second swing. Another defender rushed from Lowell's left. Gwen's web caught him in midair. Poison crossed the threads, his armor went black, and he stopped moving before he hit the street. The square stopped chasing me. Gwen stepped over both defenders and moved toward Lowell. I greeted 3 civilians fleeing past me. Greetings, 32 of 33. Lowell was the only person still facing me. Gwen's poisoned leg rose behind him. I pointed at my covered face. Vice President, look at me. Lowell snapped. I am looking. I regret it. I waved. Greetings, 33 of 33. Task complete. My clothes returned in a burst of silver light. Power slammed back into my muscles. Heartlock reopened. The square cracked under my next step. The man with the barbecue tongs lowered them. The off-duty heroes who had chased me stopped and looked toward Gwen instead. Public opinion had completed a very fast patch update. Lowell stared at my F-rank badge, then at the crater under my boot. The system dropped a weapon card into my vision. I slapped it before Gwen's leg reached him. Weapon acquired, Echo Touch. A silver line wrapped around my right index finger. I caught Gwen's poisoned limb and threw it through the truck. She tore free, landed on all 6 legs, and looked at me with sudden interest. Heartlock pulsed. Target available, Gwen Talbot! I locked her. Gwen's bell rang against her throat. Avery's thief, she whispered. Your scent is inside my beloved. Leave my scent out of your romance. She charged. I touched the pavement beside my foot. Gwen jerked sideways as if the same pressure had struck along her leg. Her surprised cry triggered an invisible blast. The force hit her chest and threw her across the square. Heartlock displayed a new meter. Scream, 12%. That answered the first rule. Echo Touch mapped nearby surfaces onto Gwen. Her voice turned the sensation into force. Lowell gripped the side of a cart and stared at my finger. What technique is that? The live testing kind. Gwen rose with poison steaming around her feet. The force had cracked one plate along her side. Heartlock raised her favorability anyway. Apparently a truck throw raised monster favorability. She understood enough to get angry. Gwen pointed one poisoned leg at me. You make Avery look at you. You carry Avery's heart scent. Now you touch me with that filthy trick. 6 legs and still jealous. Her bell rang hard. Heartlock pushed her favorability upward anyway. Gwen's smile turned dangerous. When I eat Avery, I will keep your scent as proof I won. A web snapped around my wrist. Another caught my ankle. Gwen pulled both lines and dragged me across the pavement toward a pool of poison. The edge touched my boot and ate through the sole. Heat climbed my ankle before I tore the web loose. My boosted defense slowed the poison. The pain still climbed my leg. Gwen saw me limp and spread all 6 legs. You stole Avery's scent and still break like a human. I grabbed the web around my wrist and yanked. Gwen braced all 6 legs for a pull. I used the line to swing myself onto the low wall beside her. Then I drove my marked finger along the stone. Gwen's back arched. A louder cry escaped her. The invisible force smashed every window behind her. Scream, 43%. She released one web and clamped both hands over her mouth. I touched the wall again. Her body reacted. No sound escaped. The force stayed weak. Gwen's eyes brightened. She had solved the obvious version. She tapped the silk over her mouth and pointed at my marked finger. Without a scream, the force barely moved. My best attack no longer worked. Then Gwen stamped one spider limb into the street. Poison erupted through the cracks and cut the square in half. Lowell shouted from behind the carts, "Everyone clear the square! Give him room!" The remaining guards stopped attacking Gwen and dragged civilians behind the carts. Spider silk wrapped around Gwen's mouth in 3 layers. Then she flooded the square with poison and drove me toward the buildings. The green cloud ate through benches, wheels, and the truck she had landed on. Lowell's remaining guards dragged him clear while I jumped to a window ledge. Gwen climbed after me faster than any human could. She fired web after web, forcing me up the wall and onto the roof. Her sealed mouth made every hit useless. Short touches moved the meter and produced no real force. I needed a reaction she could not hold forever. The alley below ran between 2 tall brick walls. Gwen stood at its center with poison blocking both exits. Good. I jumped from the roof. On the way down, I pressed one hand against each wall, then I dragged both palms along the brick for the entire drop. Echo Touch carried every inch into Gwen at once. Her sealed jaw shook. The silk stretched. The meter climbed past 50, then 70. Gwen stabbed all 6 legs into the pavement and tried to hold the scream inside. I kept sliding. At 90%, the bell around her throat cracked. At 100, the silk tore. Gwen screamed. Scream, 100%. The invisible force detonated through the alley. Poison blew out of the street. Gwen's magic vanished. The black bell shattered across the pavement. Her 6 spider limbs folded inward. By the time I reached the ground, the boss monster had shrunk into a spider small enough to fit on my palm. The crowd at the end of the alley saw the city-killing spider boss become a palm-sized spider. One guard lowered his sword. The old man with the newspaper raised his thumb again. Gwen tried to bite my finger. Heartlock chimed. Gwen Talbot favorability, 100%. Conquest complete. Skill acquired. Toxic fusion. Home drop unlocked. Toxic fusion could coat a weapon with Gwen's poison. Home drop opened a route to my apartment. I tapped the home command. Miniature. Gwen vanished from my palm. Gwen Talbot sent home, Princess Odessa's room. That sounded safe for nobody. Lowell reached the alley with 2 surviving guards. He looked at the melted street, the broken bell, and the empty space in my palm. The guard who had called me a pervert earlier lowered his weapon. A woman from the breakfast crowd pointed at the crater and told him I had saved them. He opened his mouth, looked at the crater, and closed it again. Then Lowell looked at my F-rank badge again. "Who taught you that touch technique?" Lowell asked. I flexed my sore fingers. System HR. Terrible instructor. Blood spread across the brick wall behind him. Mallory's red mark opened inside the blood. Avery stepped through in his powerful day form. His hand closed around the back of my head. "You ran from your promise," Avery said. The original owner of Heartlock had come to collect his system. On the ruined street beside West Haven Heroes Guild, I caught Avery's wrist before he could wrench my head back. The day-form demon god had used Mallory's blood mark to step through the wall behind me. Gwen's poison still smoked in the alley, and Lowell's guards were still moving civilians away. Avery ignored the guards, the poison, and everyone except me. "You ran," Avery said. I twisted his wrist away. "You lied about the curse. You were willing before sunrise. Before sunrise you looked different and claimed you were dying. Both details mattered." Avery's mouth tightened. Red light rolled over his body. The tall male form narrowed into a woman with silver cat ears and a black tail. The disguise was gorgeous and offensively effective. I still saw Avery. Avery slid one arm around my neck. "Better? More suspicious." Avery tugged my wrist. "Your pulse disagrees," I told Avery. "My pulse also reacts to poison. It has low standards." Avery's cat ears lowered. "You stared longer at Odessa. Odessa only tried to kill me before breakfast. I can improve." That was flirtation from a demon god who offered murder with every smile. Avery's tail curled around my wrist and pulled my hand toward Avery's chest. Red light slipped under the fur and traced my veins. I twisted free. Avery changed again, copying the weeknight form face that had opened the Blackridge door. "This face almost convinced you," Avery whispered. "This face lied about a curse." The disguise smiled. "Then choose a prettier lie." I drove my elbow between us and made space. Avery could change the face, the body, and the voice. The owner remained the demon god trying to dissolve me for spare parts. I planted my foot and stopped the pull. Avery's smile thinned. "The Heartlock System was mine. The heart inside you was mine. Your body is a temporary container. Temporary containers charge storage fees. Then I will collect everything." Avery pressed his palm against my chest. Above the alley, the West Haven Guild crest flashed white again. The pull behind my ribs snapped toward the towers. Avery's red symbols followed it into Heartlock. The sealed guild anchor gave him a direct path to the missing essence. For 1 second, every system panel vanished. Avery smiled. Heartlock rejected the connection. The red magic crossed my skin and disappeared without touching the core. Heartlock returned with 3 lines. Original claimant rejected. Current host confirmed, Liam Corbett. Hostile actions from Avery Crowell nullified. Avery's fingers froze against my chest. The cat ears vanished. The male day form snapped back into place. He tried again. A red blade formed over his hand, touched my throat, and dissolved into harmless sparks. Avery swept the same blade sideways. It cut a delivery cart in half, crossed my ribs, and vanished across my shirt without leaving a mark. The surviving guild guards raised their weapons. Avery flicked 2 fingers. A pressure wave threw them against the alley wall. The same wave reached me and disappeared. Avery grabbed my throat and poured red fire through his hand. The fire ate a circle into the street around my boots. My skin stayed cold. Lowell's remaining guard looked from the scorched stone to my untouched shirt and lowered his sword. The guard backed toward Lowell and stopped treating me as the threat. Avery saw it. Avery took 1 step back. Look, watching a demon god get locked out of his own system was beautiful. Expired password energy, divine addition. Lowell saw the attack fail from the mouth of the alley. His vice president badge was still in one hand. The other hung uselessly at his side while he stared at my F-rank badge. Avery ignored him and looked directly into my eyes. "What did you do to it?" I spread my hands. "Apparently it likes me better." Avery's calm finally broke. Avery was still inside 10 meters and Heartlock opened another option. Absorption chance available. Cost, 50% of remaining life. Condition, Avery Crowell within 10 meters. Reward, full detoxification if forced lock succeeds. 1 chance, half my remaining life. The demon god stood close enough to take it. I accepted before Avery could move. Dying in 101 days still counted as dying. Pain cut through my chest. The number changed. Estimated life remaining, approximately 50 days. A black targeting ring opened beneath Avery's feet. Heartlock reached for him. The ring climbed from the pavement around his ankles, locking 1 red segment at a time. Avery tried to strike me again. His magic failed before it formed. I stepped closer. My turn, I told him. Fear finally reached his face. The ring reached his knees. Avery's eyes snapped toward the blood mark in the wall. Avery cut his palm with one claw. The same wound opened in the blood mark inside the brick wall. Mallory cried out from somewhere beyond it. Red smoke filled the alley. I lunged before the forced lock could close. My fingers caught Avery's sleeve. The sleeve turned to blood and slipped through them. Avery vanished into Mallory's matching wound. The targeting ring collapsed empty. Heartlock kept one red location signal burning at the edge of my vision. Avery's voice came through the fading blood link. "You can still track me!" Mallory answered from the other side, breathless and angry. "Avery, what happened to Liam?" The link stayed open long enough for Avery to hear it too. Avery's voice softened. "Direct attacks no longer work. Fine, I will stop attacking him." The blood mark closed. Avery had stopped promising violence. The method was still hidden, and the next smiling face deserved suspicion. The red signal started moving across West Haven. I ran after it. 2 streets later, the poison flared. Purple blood filled my mouth. My right foot burned inside the boot. The little toe went numb, turned black, and broke apart before I could pull the boot off. I hit one knee against the pavement. Cuts opened along both arms. The red signal blurred into 3 copies. 50 days had sounded better on a screen. My body disagreed. I tried to stand. 1 step put me against the wall. A second tore the bandage from my missing finger. The poison had started collecting pieces again. Boots pounded behind me. Lowell caught my shoulder before I hit the ground and shouted for the guild medics. "He saved this district," Lowell barked when one medic hesitated at my F-rank badge. "Touch the badge again and you answer to me." The medic moved. The street tilted, and the last thing I saw was Lowell lifting my ruined boot away from the spreading purple stain. 13 hours later, I woke in West Haven's infirmary. My missing toe had been wrapped. The poison remained. Lowell Grady sat beside the bed wearing the same gold vice president badge Gwen had nearly buried with him. The moment my eyes opened, Lowell stood. Then the vice president of West Haven Heroes Guild bowed to an F-rank. "Master," Lowell said, "teach me the touch technique." I checked the room for witnesses. A medic at the door stopped pretending to organize bandages. "You are the vice president," I told him. Lowell remained bowed. "Titles do not repair what age takes from a man." He glanced at the medic by the door. The medic suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Lowell lowered his voice. "I had strength once, speed too. Certain other responses were more reliable." I looked at his gray hair and his embarrassed expression. I said, "You think Echo Touch can restore your personal functions?" Lowell's ears went red. "I saw what it did to that spider monster." I told him, "That is not an answer." Lowell held my stare. "It is the answer I am giving." The man had survived poison, public chaos, and my 33rd greeting. He had finally run out of dignity. I leaned back against the pillow. "The technique is complicated." That part was true. I had learned it while falling down a building. Lowell lifted his head. "I can learn. Echo Touch came through a weapon I no longer have. You cannot copy it by watching my finger." Lowell finally straightened. "Every technique has a principle. Mine has an abusive employer. Then teach me how to survive the employer." The vice president was fully committed. Honestly, that level of desperation deserved a business proposal. I told him, "Then I need something first." His posture changed immediately. His shoulders straightened. The guild vice president was back. I gave him Avery's description and the last direction the red signal had moved. "Use guild resources to find Avery Crowell. Keep the search quiet. Keep Captain Von Heller away from my medical file." Lowell placed one fist over his chest. "Agreed. And until I understand Echo Touch properly, your training stays private." Lowell bowed again. "Yes, master." The medic dropped a roll of bandages. Before I could enjoy that status reversal, the infirmary door opened. Marcy Bellows entered with a black-edged warrant and 2 guild guards. She was Lowell's secretary, and the paper in her hands had my name beside the word death. Marcy caught the last inch of Lowell's bow. Her eyes moved from his gold badge to my F-rank badge, then back again. "Captain Vaughn filed an emergency desertion charge," Marcy said. "He claims Liam abandoned Blackridge, attacked his captain, and caused the squad deaths. He requested execution." Captain Credit had turned his own cowardice into my confession. One guard reached for the restraint chain on his belt. Lowell placed his vice president badge on my blanket. "Liam is under my personal supervision. Nobody detains him." The guard's hand left the chain. The second guard moved behind Marcy instead of beside my bed. Marcy set the warrant beside Lowell's badge. "The order stays active until Blackridge is reviewed. Outside your protection, Captain Vaughn can still act on it." I tapped Vaughn's name. "Did he mention ordering the squad into Rowena's beam?" Marcy looked at my missing toe and finger. "The filing mentions no boss named Rowena." Of course it didn't. Vaughn had cut every fact that made him look guilty. Lowell took a guild banquet invitation from his coat and placed it beside the warrant. "Then Liam stays with me, and he still attends tonight's appreciation banquet." I looked at the death warrant and the invitation. Execution and dinner on the same schedule. Efficient office. Marcy almost smiled. West Haven Values Organization. I learned later why the warrant had moved so fast. Before sunrise in a West Haven guild office, Roland Heller received the casualty report. Roland was Vaughn's older brother and partner in stolen resource sales. A red audit flag covered the missing resource column. Roland threw the report at Vaughn. Put every death on the F rank. Vaughn raised his empty sleeve. He attacked me in front of the squad. Good, Roland answered. Call it desertion, call it murder. Demand execution before an auditor reaches Blackridge. Vaughn asked about the survivors. Injured witnesses can be called confused, Roland told him. Liam cannot. Make him a corpse or a criminal. I had inconveniently stayed alive. Back in the infirmary, the warrant still lay beside Lowell's badge. Lowell's badge bought time, maybe one night. The warrant had given Captain Credit armed men and a legal excuse. He only needed me outside Lowell's protection. The death warrant still lay on my infirmary blanket when Heartlock found Avery again. His red signal had stopped near my apartment in West Haven. Lowell's vice president badge protected me inside the infirmary. The second I left his reach, Captain Von Heller could put chains on me and call it justice. Then the signal pulsed twice. Odessa should have been at home with miniature Gwen. I swung my legs off the bed. Lowell blocked the door. You can barely stand. Avery is near my apartment, I told him. Odessa may be there with him. Marcy Bellows still held the active warrant beside the wall. Captain Vaughn can arrest you outside Vice President Grady's supervision. I pulled on my boot over the missing toe. Then Captain Credit can chase me after I rescue my princess. Lowell lowered his voice. Master, take guards. I looked at the warrant, then at the guild guards who had almost chained me 13 hours earlier. I told Lowell, they'll slow me down. Keep reviewing Blackridge. Keep Vaughn away from this room. Lowell moved aside because he knew I was going anyway. Leaving gave Vaughn's armed men a legal excuse to grab me. I left anyway. At my apartment, the front door hung open. Miniature Gwen sat on the kitchen counter beside an overturned bowl. The conquered spider boss raised 2 front legs when I entered, ready to bite first and ask questions. Never. Odessa was gone. I checked the bedroom, bathroom, and broken window. The rooms held no blood or body. Odessa's usual threats were gone too. Gwen skittered across the counter and tapped the floor with one leg. A red drag mark crossed the boards near the window. A piece of black restraint metal lay beneath the curtain. Anti-monster cuffs. Avery's signal moved west. During my hospital blackout, somebody had entered my home and dragged Odessa out in anti-monster restraints. Avery's moving signal gave me the only trail. I followed the signal through West Haven's warehouse district with Gwen inside my coat. Leaving a poisonous spider boss home alone had already failed once. She bit the lining whenever I slowed. I am moving. Gwen clicked her legs against my ribs. You are the size of a coin. Your feedback has limits. She bit harder. Fair response. By nightfall, Avery's signal reached an abandoned loading yard just beyond West Haven's outer barrier. The sun dropped, Avery shifted into the weeknight form, and the red mark vanished. The moment I crossed the barrier, Echo Touch's overdue return cycle caught up. Heartlock gave me 2 minutes before the borrowed gains dropped toward my public F-rank baseline. Temporary combat support reset. 2 minutes. Men stepped from behind the freight containers. Their jackets carried the Night Spur Gang patch. The gang ran illegal monster and human auctions. One guard held the matching half of the restraint cuff from my apartment. The gang captain pointed a hooked blade at me. Wrong yard F-rank. I held up the broken cuff. Wrong apartment. Where are the captives? He glanced at the metal, then hid the reaction behind a smile. That answered enough. The captain saw me checking empty air and laughed. He is counting how many bones we break. 2 minutes, I told him. He spread his arms. You think you can last 2 minutes? I think you should start running now. He chose violence instead. Naturally, the first guard rushed with a shock baton. I stepped inside the swing and drove my shoulder through his chest. He hit a container hard enough to dent it. 1 minute, 47 seconds. 2 men came from my left. I caught one wrist, redirected his knife into the other's restraint chain, and kicked both across the concrete. A net launcher fired behind me. Gwen jumped from my coat and bit through the firing cable. She vanished back inside before the gunner understood why his weapon had died. I pointed at the smoking launcher. My pocket has opinions. The gunner dropped it. 1 minute, 23 seconds. The gang captain backed toward the office door while sending everyone else forward. Same management school as Vaughn. Different jacket. One guard swung an iron hook at my missing finger. I caught his forearm and slammed him face first across the auction ledger table. Another tried to lock a collar around my neck. I snapped the collar shut around his own wrist and used him to block a baton strike. The 2 men collided and folded together. 58 seconds. The captain reached the office. I threw the hooked blade after him. It pinned his sleeve to the door. He yanked once, tore the jacket, and kept running. So much for gang captain confidence. I crossed the yard, caught him by the collar, and lifted him against the door. Key! He spat near my boot. Auction already started. I tightened my grip. Key. He laughed until Gwen crawled onto my shoulder. The miniature spider opened her mouth. Green poison gathered between her fangs. The captain's smile died. He pointed with one shaking finger. Under the desk. Cell room behind the office. I dropped him through the desk. 21 seconds. The keyring sat beneath the splintered drawer. I grabbed it, kicked open the rear door, and found a concrete stairwell leading underground. One last guard rose from the bottom step. I hit him before the timer reached 0. Combat support reset complete. My boosted strength dropped hard enough to make my knees bend. The final guard was already unconscious, so I grabbed his vest and dragged him down the stairs. He bounced down the last few steps behind me. The prison room waited behind a steel door. I unlocked it and threw the unconscious guard inside first. He slid across the floor and stopped beneath a row of cages. "Auction is over," I announced. "Management has been replaced." Odessa looked up from the nearest cage. Anti-monster cuffs pinned her wrists to the wall. Her full-sized body had been forced to its knees, but her eyes were still royal murder. "Liam," Odessa breathed. Relief hit her face before she buried it under anger. "You took too long." I crossed the room and started on her locks. I cleared the staff in under 2 minutes. "Leave a fair review." Odessa leaned closer. "Free me and I will consider 3 stars." Cruel. A second cage held a frightened woman in a torn gray dress. She hugged herself behind the bars and watched every movement. The captive looked human and exhausted. Terrible lighting still failed to hide how beautiful she was. In my defense, hostile captivity had apparently hired a stylist. The woman whispered, "Please, do not leave me here." I looked at her wrists. The same anti-monster cuffs circled them. That made her either a monster, a victim, or Avery pretending to be harmless. Before I could decide, Heartlock opened another return prompt. Weapon return task. Produce 10 audible reactions with 10 rear swats. Each attempt must produce a sound. Silent attempt penalty, full body freeze for 5 minutes. System HR had found a rescue scene and made it embarrassing on purpose. Odessa read my expression. "What does it want now?" I unlocked one cuff. 10 reactions before we leave. 1 silent attempt freezes me. Odessa's mouth curved. "Then choose someone loud." I looked at her. She lifted her chin. "You rescued me. I will allow one." That sounded dangerously cooperative, Odessa warned. "Do it before I reconsider." I turned her sideways and gave the back of her skirt one firm swat. Odessa yelped, then glared over her shoulder. "Reactions, 1 out of 10. Effective," I told her. Odessa's tail snapped around my waist. "Mention this outside the room and lose the hand. Flirty gratitude. Monster Princess Edition." I removed her second cuff. Odessa stood, caught my collar, and fed from the side of my neck. Red light moved from my skin into her mouth. The bite hurt. Her magic returned faster. I kept my voice low. "You could warn me." Odessa released me and wiped one fang. "I did, months ago." Red light gathered around her hands. She touched the missing finger on my left hand. "I borrowed your essence. I will repay it as protection when you need it." That sounded useful enough to survive the invoice later. The woman in the second cage reached through the bars. "Please help me. I can repay you too." "Any way you want." Odessa's eyes narrowed. The woman had soft eyes, shaking hands, and exactly the kind of offer Avery would weaponize. Still, the cuffs were real. I opened her cage and unlocked one wrist. She clung to my sleeve. "Thank you." I kept my other hand on the key. "I need one sound, then we move." The woman had heard every rule I gave Odessa. Her fear softened into a tiny smile. Her smile was wrong, and I still made the attempt. I gave the back of her dress one controlled swat. She made no sound. Heartlock flashed red. Silent attempt. Penalty active, 5 minutes. Every muscle in my body locked. I stayed upright because the system froze me mid-breath. The woman let go of my sleeve and straightened. Her shaking stopped. 5 minutes, she murmured. "That is generous." Odessa lunged. The woman slipped behind my frozen body and used me as a shield. Odessa stopped her claws inches from my face. I could move my eyes and force out a whisper. That was it. The fake captive ran one finger along my jaw. "You keep rescuing pretty strangers, Liam." I wondered when that habit would become useful. Odessa's tail lashed the bars. "Get away from him." The woman smiled at her. "You were trapped beside me for hours. You never noticed." Odessa's face went hot with rage. Good. Jealousy was making the disguise talk. Odessa stepped close and bit my neck again, feeding while I could not object. Red light poured into her. The promised protection gathered beneath my skin like a warm second pulse. The fake captive's smile disappeared. "Share," she told Odessa. Odessa kept one arm around me. "I found him first." The fake captive scoffed. "You tried to remove his head first." Odessa tightened her arm around me. "That still counts." The fake captive pressed against my other side and opened a thin red mark across her palm. The same pressure closed around my waist from somewhere I could not see. A familiar grip pinned my ribs. Tight, precise, and shaped like the scorpion hold Mallory had used behind the Blackridge wall. The woman inhaled at the exact moment the invisible grip tightened. Blood resonance. Mallory was inside the link. I forced sound through my frozen throat. Mallory Fitch, pull Avery out! The woman went still. A second voice came through the red mark. Mallory sounded breathless. How did you know? I rasped. Nobody else grips me like a hostile seatbelt. Odessa heard the name and tore at the woman's sleeve. The disguise split under her claws. Red light showed beneath the false skin. Avery's nightform eyes looked back at me for one clean second. There it was. The frightened captive was the living antidote who wanted my heart. Avery smiled anyway. You recognized Mallory before you recognized me. I should be offended. I told Avery, your disguise was better than her manners. The freeze timer reached 4 minutes. Odessa pulled Avery away from me. Avery caught Odessa's wrist and the blood mark flared brighter. I looked directly into it. Mallory, pull Avery out now. Odessa will keep feeding until your leash shares every second. Mallory swore under her breath. The blood mark opened across Avery's shoulder. Red hands dragged Avery backward into it. Odessa held on until Avery's false dress tore at the sleeve. Avery vanished through the link. The mark closed. Odessa turned toward the empty air. Coward! I remained frozen. The penalty still had 4 minutes left, and Heartlock intended to collect every second. Odessa searched the corridor and dragged the unconscious guard across the doorway as a barricade. Then she stood beside my locked body with her claws out. You rescued me, Odessa told me. I will guard you until this ridiculous punishment ends. I could only blink. Blink once if you agree that I won the argument. I stared at her. Odessa nodded. Agreement accepted. The Pocket Princess had learned contract law from System HR, terrible combination. Boots crossed the loading floor above us. Odessa's tail tightened around the door handle. The gang reinforcements reached the stairwell, saw their captain and guards scattered outside, then chose survival over another auction shift. Their boots retreated. The timer finally reached 0. Freeze penalty complete. My muscles released at once. I staggered and caught the cage. The mission still read 1 out of 10. Avery had escaped. Odessa was free. I had also gained a new safety rule. Attractive strangers after dark required background checks and possibly holy water. Her clash with Avery spent most of the essence she had taken. She shrank back into pocket form and climbed into my coat before we left the holding site. Night had fully settled when Odessa and I left the loading yard. The warrant was still active, so I took the fastest route through West Haven's security gate. Marcy stood between Captain Vaughn and the city entrance. Vaughn had brought armed guildmen and the same death warrant. His empty sleeve was pinned beneath his captain's coat. His remaining hand rested on his sword. Marcy held a fresh notice against her chest. Blackridge was found collapsed and empty. The desertion order is being revoked. You cannot arrest Liam while that notice is active. Vaughn looked past her and saw me. Losing a hand had not improved his judgment. There is my murderer, Vaughn announced. Several guards shifted toward me. Marcy kept her place. Captain, Marcy warned. Vice President Grady placed him under supervision. Vaughn stepped close. You are a secretary carrying paper. Move. Marcy held the notice higher. No! Vaughn slapped her across the face. The sound cut through the gate. Marcy hit the rail and caught herself with one hand. The notice fell beside her shoe. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. Vaughn pointed at her with his remaining hand. Call me a liar again and I will put you in the same cell. Marcy touched the red mark on her cheek. I walked between them. Vaughn had nearly killed Alyssa because he treated low ranks as disposable. Now he had struck Marcy for standing in his way. I picked up the notice and handed it back to her. Go to Lowell, I told Marcy. Bring his authorization here in 10 minutes. Marcy looked at the armed men around us. They will take you. I know. Her eyes sharpened. She understood the choice. I added, come back for your apology. Vaughn laughed. You think the vice president will leave his banquet for an F rank? I turned and offered him both wrists. 10 minutes, I told him. Try not to waste them. Vaughn snapped the restraints shut himself. Captain Credit smiled like he had finally earned a victory. He marched me through the gate and into the interrogation wing. The door closed behind us. On the table, beneath the clock, his remaining hand reached for a hammer. Inside the interrogation room, Captain Vaughn placed my left hand beneath the hammer. The wall clock showed 9 minutes and 40 seconds. His 9 armed men filled the doorway, and Odessa stayed hidden inside my coat. Vaughn wanted a confession before Marcy returned with Lowell. Captain Credit paced before his squad and retold Blackridge as his own hero story. I fought Rowena alone, Vaughn announced. I lost my hand shielding the team. Liam attacked me from behind and caused every death. One soldier stared at Vaughn's empty sleeve. Another looked at the restraints around my wrists. They had survived the real room. Vaughn still expected applause for the fan fiction. Vaughn leaned over me. Tell them, Liam. Do cowards deserve to live? I looked at his empty sleeve. Ask the men you pushed into the beam. He spread my fingers across the wood. The missing pinky left an empty space at the edge. Vaughn tapped that space with the hammer. The poison started the work. I will finish it. I stopped smiling. Inside my coat, Odessa whispered against my chest. The essence I took restored enough magic for one shield. Her tiny claws pressed into my shirt. You rescued me, Odessa added. This is the repayment, the rest remains debt. Red warmth spread beneath my skin and wrapped my hand. The warmth reached my fingers before Vaughn swung. Good. I still needed him to commit. I looked at him. Do it. The clock showed 8 minutes. He brought the hammer down across my fingers. The strike cracked the tabletop. My hand stayed flat beneath the hammer. The skin stayed clean. Every bone remained whole. Even a bruise refused to appear. Vaughn froze with the handle still clenched. His eyes moved from my untouched hand to the squad. Nobody gave him the shock he wanted. The nearest man stared at the cracked table instead. One soldier leaned forward, another stepped away from the table. I flexed my fingers under the hammerhead. Was that the confession? I asked. Vaughn turned toward his squad. You see? No regret, no loyalty. I crawled out carrying this squad's honor. A guard near the door lowered his eyes. I glanced at the men behind him. Did he carry any of you? Nobody answered. I nodded at the hammer. You brought a hammer to edit a report. His face twisted. This is discipline. I glanced at his last hand. This is your one remaining hand making bad career choices. One guard let his restraint chain fall back against his belt. Vaughn lifted the hammer and checked the metal as if the tool had betrayed him. His first hit had carried his full shoulder. The cracked table proved it. Odessa's shield pulsed once beneath my knuckles. Vaughn swung again. The hammer bounced from my hand and tore itself from his grip. It hit the wall behind him. A guard flinched. Vaughn did not look back. Beautiful! 2 full swings had failed to leave a bruise. The outer door opened a few inches. A junior guard held up a sealed notice. Captain, the revocation arrived. Secretary Bellows is returning with Vice President Grady. Vaughn crossed the room and caught the door before it opened wider. Hold it outside, he ordered. Nobody enters until the prisoner confesses. The guard hesitated. Vaughn gripped the man's collar with his remaining hand. That is a direct order. The guard backed away with the sealed notice and never saluted. Vaughn slammed the door shut. Now Vaughn knew the warrant was dying. He chose the hammer anyway. He picked it up and returned to the table. The clock showed 6 minutes. Vaughn struck my knuckles a third time. Odessa's shield flashed red. The hammer handle split down the middle. Half the handle stayed in Vaughn's hand. The metal head rolled across the floor and stopped beside his boot. Nobody spoke. I lifted my untouched hand from the cratered table. Captain, I told him, your interrogation is losing parts. Vaughn grabbed the broken handle and tried to stab it through my palm. The wood snapped against Odessa's shield. Inside my coat, Odessa's tiny body trembled. The red warmth around my hand thinned to one flickering layer. Her repayment had a limit, and Vaughn had nearly spent it. One more, Odessa whispered. After that, break him yourself. Her priorities remained excellent. His breath came faster. 2 soldiers backed away from the table. A third kept both hands open at his sides. Vaughn turned on them. Why are you standing there? Restrain him. Nobody moved. He pointed at the nearest soldier. That is an order. The soldier looked at the sealed door. His captain bars still shone on his coat. Nobody reached for me. The wall clock hit 3 minutes. Then the interrogation door came off its hinges. Lowell Grady kicked it inward with Marcy and 2 guild guards behind him. The broken door struck the wall. Vaughn jumped away from it and nearly tripped over the hammerhead. Lowell held the revocation notice in one hand. His gold badge caught the ceiling light. Release Liam Corbett, Lowell ordered. Vaughn lifted the broken hammer handle. Vice President, this man murdered my squad. Lowell stepped over the door. Your warrant was revoked before your 3rd strike. Marcy entered behind him. The red mark still crossed her cheek. The nearest guard shifted toward Marcy instead of Vaughn. Vaughn saw it and turned toward his men. Tell him, Vaughn demanded. Tell the Vice President what happened in Blackridge. The first soldier stared at the floor. Another stepped away from Vaughn. A third removed his hand from his sword. Vaughn's voice cracked. I am your captain. Nobody moved toward him. His men looked at Lowell instead. Lowell looked at my untouched hand, the broken table, and the hammerhead on the floor. His jaw tightened. Captain Heller, Lowell said, you abused guild authority after receiving notice of revocation. Vaughn pointed at me. He surrendered willingly. I did, I answered. Every face turned toward me. Lowell's authority could end the arrest. I had entered for something more personal. I stood and placed the restraints on the table. Vaughn did not read the revocation notice before arresting me, I told Lowell. I will waive the arrest complaint. Relief hit Vaughn's face so fast it looked painful. Marcy stared at me. Lowell did too. I raised one finger. One condition. Vaughn's relief stopped. I looked at the armed men who had followed him through the gate. Every man who stood behind Vaughn will bow to Marcy Bellows and apologize for letting him strike her. Marcy's hand lowered from her cheek. Vaughn barked, they will do no such thing. The first soldier looked at Marcy's cheek, then at the broken hammer on the floor. He stepped forward and bowed. Secretary Bellows, I am sorry. Vaughn raised the broken handle like it was still a command baton. The second soldier looked at it, then bowed too. Then the rest of the line folded one by one. Vaughn watched his armed escort bow to the woman he had called a paper carrier. The notice sat on the table while Vaughn's escort bowed in front of Marcy. Heartlock reopened the unfinished return task. Reactions? 1 out of 10. System HR had left me 9 reactions short and provided 9 apologizing men. Sometimes the universe cared about efficiency. I picked up a narrow training baton from the weapons rack. Marcy saw it and blinked. Liam? I told Marcy. The apology needs audible sincerity. The first soldier remained bowed. I gave the back of his trousers one sharp swat. He yelped. Reactions? 2 out of 10. I moved to the second man. Louder apology. I am sorry, Secretary Bellows. 1 swat, 1 shout. Reactions? 3 out of 10. Then the line accelerated. The next 5 men chose Marcy over Vaughn in full volume. Each bowed lower, apologized louder, and yelped when the baton landed. Reactions? 8 out of 10. Vaughn's face darkened with every sound. Marcy tried to stay serious. Her mouth betrayed her anyway. The 8th guard bowed until his forehead nearly touched the floor. Secretary Bellows, I am sincerely sorry. The baton landed. Reactions? 9 out of 10. The final guard stopped, looked at Marcy, and waited. Marcy touched the fading mark on her cheek. You followed him here. The guard faced forward and bowed. Fair. I am sorry. I delivered the last swat, he shouted. Reactions? 10 out of 10. Return task complete. System functions restored. I twisted my wrists. The restraints snapped open. The 9 men stayed bent. Vaughn was the only person in uniform still standing, and even that was temporary. Marcy looked at the bowing line, then at Vaughn. Color rose across her face when the final guard apologized directly to her. She touched the fading slap mark, then let herself smile. You promised an apology, Marcy told me. I set the baton across my shoulder. I tend to over-deliver when the client is rude. She lifted her chin and kept the smile. Vaughn backed toward the broken door. The complaint is waived. This is finished. I set the baton down. The arrest complaint is finished, I agreed. He stopped retreating. I crossed the room and caught his remaining wrist. Vaughn tried to pull away. Odessa's shield was fading, but Conrad's old strength remained more than enough. The hammer was personal, I told him. His face emptied. Liam, Lowell warned quietly. I looked at Marcy's cheek, my broken table, and Vaughn's one useful hand. Then I bent that arm across my knee. The wrist broke with one hard snap. Vaughn dropped to both knees and screamed. His squad stayed bowed. One soldier started forward. He saw Marcy's cheek, stopped, and lowered his eyes again. Marcy stepped around Vaughn and picked up the notice he had ordered hidden. She held it against her chest while the medics lifted him from the floor. I released the ruined hand. Now the matter is forgiven. Captain Credit left with both arms useless and nobody asking for his next order. His captain bars stayed on his coat. Nobody in the room treated them like a command. Lowell waited until the medics carried Vaughn away. Then he pulled me aside. The Brightwater Order sent a purification specialist to tonight's appreciation banquet. She can remove toxins and regenerate missing tissue. My left pinky and right little toe were still gone. Avery remained loose. My life clock still sat near 50 days. I accepted the route. Lowell stayed behind to finish the revocation. Marcy escorted me directly to the banquet hall. An hour later, inside Westhaven Heroes Guild's main hall, the banquet's captains were pretending not to stare at Fiona Merrick. Fiona was the visiting saintess of the Brightwater Order and the healer who might repair what the blood rain had taken. She wore a white ceremonial dress designed to expose temptation before she purified it. That was her explanation. In my defense, the dress was conducting excellent research. Lowell entered behind us, saw the gawkers, and cleared his throat. Show respect, he warned the room. Brightwater guests are under guild protection. Fiona looked across the men staring at her and smiled. Vice President, if staring requires punishment, you will need a larger detention wing. Several captains looked away at once. Fiona's eyes settled on Lowell. Almost every man here reacted, she added. You barely moved. Age has made you unusually peaceful. A captain near the drinks table choked into his glass. Another looked at Lowell with sudden sympathy. The vice president had survived a spider boss only to get publicly diagnosed by a saintess. Lowell's ears turned red. He looked at me. I studied the ceiling. Master's confidentiality remained sacred. Fiona noticed the exchange and raised one eyebrow. Interesting. Lowell changed subjects with the speed of a guilty man. Explain the Brightwater test. A captain near Fiona gestured at her ceremonial dress. You dress like that and blame men for looking? Fiona turned her smile on him. I do not blame the fever for raising the thermometer. The captain's friends laughed before he could decide whether he had been insulted. Fiona lifted the curtain beside her. A black tent stood behind it. A clear gemstone rested on a pedestal at the entrance. The Brightwater Order studies active evil thoughts so we can remove them, Fiona told the hall. This purity stone will measure what each of you wants when temptation stands in front of you. The loudest captain laughed and stepped toward the tent. Fiona smiled at him. Excellent. Confidence usually gives us the funniest score. The first captain entered Fiona's purity tent, smiling like the score already belonged to him. We were still inside Westhaven Heroes, Guild's banquet hall. Fiona Merrick stood beside the purity stone, and every guest watched the clear gemstone wait for a number. The rule was simple. The stone ignored the rest of a person's life and scored the malicious or lewd intent active inside the tent. Fiona folded her arms. Try to keep the score below 80. The captain laughed. My heart is clean. The tent flap closed behind him. A woman's laugh drifted through the cloth. Then the captain's voice changed. Come closer. The tent shook once. It threw him back into the hall with his jacket open and both arms reaching for someone who was no longer there. The purity stone flashed. 88%! Half the hall laughed. The other half checked the exit. The captain grabbed his jacket and pointed at the tent. That construct cheated! Fiona looked at the number. She smiled at you. You surrendered national secrets. A second captain pushed through the crowd. 88 is amateur work. I have discipline. He entered before the first man could recover. Inside the tent, a cat-eared test construct purred at him. The second captain lasted even less time. He flew through the flap backward and landed beside the first. 92%. The first captain looked at him. Discipline? The second fixed his collar. She changed tactics. Fiona nodded solemnly. She said hello. Brutal strategy. The crowd laughed harder. One by one, the confident men stopped volunteering. The first captain tried to slip behind a pillar. Fiona pointed at the 88% still glowing over his head and made him stand beside the tent as a warning. The second captain joined him at 92%, suddenly less interested in comparing discipline. Marcy leaned toward me. They were very loud before the numbers. The scores handled them, I told her. Then Fiona looked at me. My F-rank badge, missing finger, and recent death warrant had already made me the banquet's favorite bad decision. Liam Corbett, Fiona called. Your turn. The two failed captains looked delighted. One pointed at me. He will break the stone. The other laughed. Look at the women around him. He lives above 80. They had a fair argument and terrible timing. I stepped toward the tent. Fiona blocked the entrance with one bare foot against the frame. The construct cannot hurt you. Do not attack her. I asked Fiona, does she change faces? Fiona studied me. She adapts to preference. That answer made the situation worse. Avery had already used a weak woman, a cat girl, and a frightened captive. Every beautiful stranger now got checked for red light. Fiona lowered her foot. Enter! Inside the tent, the banquet noise disappeared. A woman with black cat ears sat on a velvet chair beneath one lamp. She smiled and opened both arms. Come here! The Catwoman construct purred. I stopped 3 steps away. The face was unfamiliar. The confidence was Avery level. Name, I told her. She tilted her head. Does it matter? A lot lately. She stood and walked toward me. The dress was distracting. I still kept 3 steps between us. She reached for my neck. I stepped aside. The construct laughed. You are staring! Threat assessment. At my dress? I kept my hands up. Disguises hide weapons. She moved behind me and tried to wrap both arms around my waist. I turned with her and kept the same distance. You're afraid of a hug, she teased. Avery already tried to dissolve me during a hug. The construct blinked. Good. Even fake seduction needed context. She changed tactics and leaned closer. I can be whoever you want. That is exactly what Avery said. Her smile finally slipped. I checked her eyes, hands, shadow, and the space around her for a blood mark. I looked long enough to appear interested. My actual goal was finding Avery before Avery found my heart. The Catwoman construct touched my chest with one finger. I caught her wrist. No red light, I murmured. She pulled free. You are very strange. Occupational injury. The tent opened behind me. Fiona stood beside the purity stone with the entire hall watching. The gemstone remained clear. Then, one number appeared. 0%. Nobody laughed. The first captain checked the display twice. The second leaned close enough for Fiona to push his forehead away with one finger. Lowell looked from my score to the monster bite mark on my neck. Marcy covered a smile with her glass. Fiona picked up the stone and held it toward the light. 0, she repeated. One captain protested. He stared at the construct longer than I did. I answered, you stared because you wanted her. I stared because she might have been Avery. The captain looked around. Who is Avery? I told him. A reason to stop hugging strangers. Fiona's gaze sharpened. Your active intent inside the tent was threat detection. Beautiful. Avery paranoia had just earned me private treatment. Fiona touched 2 fingers to the stone and ran the test again. The display stayed at 0. She checked the pedestal, then checked me as if one of us had been assembled incorrectly. The first captain demanded a retest for himself. Fiona pointed at his open jacket. Your first result remains persuasive. Fiona placed the stone back on its stand. Clear the hall. Liam qualifies for private purification. The failed captains stopped laughing. Men who had expected a pervert score moved aside for the 0% F rank. One captain even held the treatment room door open, then pretended he had planned to do that for everyone. 10 minutes later, Fiona took me into a private treatment room. Fiona pointed to a padded bench. Lie down, remove the injured boot, keep your shirt on. I obeyed. She saw the missing toe on my right foot and the missing pinky on my left hand. Her smile disappeared. The poison took both? It has been collecting pieces. Bright water can rebuild the damage. The deeper source requires your awareness inside the treatment. I nodded. Fiona removed her shoes and placed one bare foot against my chest. I looked at it, then at her. Bright water channels purification through the souls, she said. Do not make this childish. You led with a foot and trusted me to be mature. Bold strategy. Fiona pressed harder. Your score is 0. Do not fight your way into negative numbers. The room disappeared. I dropped into black water with purple roots around my arms and legs. One root tightened around my ankle and dragged me down. A white line cut through the dark. Follow the light, Fiona ordered. I tore one root from my wrist, 2 more closed around me. White light hooked beneath my shoulders. Fiona pulled. The first layer snapped. Pain burned through my left hand. Bone pushed from the smooth edge where my pinky had been. Skin covered it. A nail formed last. My right foot burned next. The missing little toe grew back beneath Fiona's white light. I flexed all 10 fingers. Then I moved all 10 toes. Fiona made me touch the new pinky to my thumb. She pressed the restored toe and watched it curl. The feeling was clean. The blood rain had taken those pieces in seconds. Bright water returned them while I watched. I laughed once because I could not help it. For 1 minute my body looked whole again. Fiona lifted her foot from my chest and checked the new tissue. A real smile appeared. Both restored, she said. I held up the new pinky. I may start believing the dress was legitimate research. Fiona's eyes moved to my hand, then back to my face. Do not ruin your 0 score immediately. The stone judged the tent. This room has different lighting. Her mouth curved despite herself. Then the purple veins beneath my wrist darkened again. The visible damage was repaired. The core poison remained. I stood once to test the restored foot. All 10 toes carried my weight. I closed the new pinky around Fiona's hand. Her smile widened, then she cleared her throat and pulled free. Purple blood rose beneath the skin of my wrist before she released my hand. Fiona's smile vanished. There is a deeper root near your heart, she told me. I can reach it, but the shield must stay stable. I lay back down. She placed one foot against my chest again and caught my wrist with both hands. The inner sea returned. This time, the white light carried me below the first roots. A thick purple mass pulsed in the dark beneath my heart. Hundreds of thin roots spread from it through the water. Fiona's shield formed around us like a clear sphere. Stay inside, she ordered. If the shield breaks, the poison sea will close over you. I opened Heartlock only to check my remaining life. At that exact moment, Fiona's white light touched the purple mass beneath my heart. Heartlock reacted before I could close it. Active purification source detected. Automatic target lock. Fiona Merrick. System HR had targeted my healer during the only treatment that worked. Fiona's grip tightened around my wrist in the real room. Inside the sea, the shield flickered. Fiona, Heartlock locked you. Break contact, I warned. Stay focused, she answered. Heartlock chimed. Favorability increased. Fiona's white light bent toward me instead of the poison mass. The shield cracked across one side. She dragged me closer inside the sphere, trying to stabilize the connection. The contact fed Heartlock again. Favorability increased. The meter exposed another liar before she even denied it. Fiona's breath caught in the room. Inside the sea, the clear shield split open. Purple roots flooded through the gap and wrapped my legs. Release the treatment, I ordered. Fiona's voice shook. I can finish. She pulled at the core root. The root pulled back harder. The shield collapsed. Black water closed over my head. The treatment had become a drowning trap. I kicked against the roots and reached for the white light above me. Fiona grabbed my arm, but her focus kept breaking each time our hands met. Heartlock flashed another increase. The water filled my mouth. I clenched my restored left hand until the new pinky hurt. The pain cut through the inner sea. I pulled toward it and forced my eyes open. The treatment room slammed back into view. I rolled off the bench, coughing. Fiona caught my shoulder before I hit the floor. White light scattered around us and went out. The purple veins remained beneath my wrist. Heartlock showed the same life estimate. Approximately 50 days. My finger and toe stayed restored. The core poison stayed too. Fiona knelt beside me, breathing harder than the treatment justified. Her hand remained on my shoulder for one extra beat, then she pulled it back. The purification requires long-term sessions, she said. You will come to the Brightwater Order. I sat against the bench. That sounded less like an invitation. Fiona lifted her chin. It was a medical order. Heartlock chimed. Favorability increased. I looked at the screen. Fiona saw my expression and narrowed her eyes. Do not smile. Professional development. Her face warmed. She stood too quickly, caught the edge of the bench, then nudged it back into place without meeting my eyes. My finger and toe were back. My clock still read 50 days. Avery remained the complete cure. I learned later what Roland handed Vaughn that same night. In a private West Haven office, Roland Heller stood over his younger brother while both of Vaughn's arms hung useless in fresh braces. Roland struck him across the face, then drove his shoulder into the desk when Vaughn tried to stand. You lost both hands to an F rank, Roland said. You lost the squad, the warrant, and the vice president. Vaughn spat blood onto the carpet and kept his head down. Roland threw a folded map onto the desk. The title across it read, Ashfall Dungeon. The guild listed Ashfall as A rank, but the creature ruling its deepest room was S rank. Another zone nearly killed Ashfall's S rank boss, Roland told him. The creature escaped with injuries so severe an F rank could finish it. Vaughn looked up. Roland tapped the map. I suppressed the report. You enter first, land the final strike, and claim the S rank victory before the original team returns. Captain Credit's eyes fixed on the map. Roland leaned closer. Can you still hold a weapon? Vaughn smiled. Then I will take the victory.